first guy's name?
This guy.
That was the first guy.
Yeah.
The debtor.
Yeah. I hear you. Are we on, guys? All right. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday, May the 16th, 2016 City Work Session. This time I will call the meeting to order, and our first up is the 2016 Clean and Green. And welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Welcome.
we're looking forward to this.
Well, thank you. We are going to start the slideshow here from beginning. Okay.
Of course, you have to tell us who you are and
Okay.
all that kind of good stuff. Okay.
My name is Arlene Brandt Jensen. I'm the chair of the Clean and Green Committee and H2O20 Committee.
And I'm Carla Roby, and I'm a committee member.
Okay. Well, going on, we had another great year with the spring litter blitz, and it was late April, early May. We had it extended for about 4 or 5 days with a rainy spell in there, but about 40 groups and businesses participated this year, and several groups took two or more zones because they thought maybe, hey, this is fun, and the first one wasn't so bad, so they signed up for another one. And some individuals worked in 2 or more different groups. And we always ask for some feedback online, and this year, total number of workers was 550. Total hours spent picking up litter, almost 1,000 hours. That's a lot of time. And now this is only from the people who reported. There are some that did not get their feedback in. So these numbers are low. This is what has been reported. And then the 200 bags of trash and 45 bags of recycling. And if you are into the numbers and into kind of a trend here, this has been going on since 2013. So if you see those numbers, all the workers that have been spending time with this from 2013 to 2016, about 2,200 people have volunteered about 4,100 hours. And we want to thank our partners in this, the sanitation department for collecting the trash bags and the recycling bags, the street department for having the litter drop-off location right in front of the litter, or the street department, and the police for keeping us safe, and the mayor's office. Thank you, Shelley, for keeping our website going and finding any little glitches and fixing those. And then the Watertown Area Community Foundation was where we had the pickup for the supplies this year. And the Chamber of Commerce is going to be giving out a $100 prize of Watertown bucks that we will draw later in a few minutes.
Now we'd just like to acknowledge the people that they headed up the groups, the 40 groups that went out in all various areas in Watertown. So you can just look through the names, and I'm sure everyone will know somebody on this list or some of the people that would have been on some of these. The banks participated, the schools participated, businesses. We had a little bit of everybody in town coming together to pick up the trash in Watertown. And I hope you have noticed, because I certainly have, I used to walk more than I do now, but out at the lake, when I'd walk, I'd have so many bags that at one time I had to have someone give me a ride back home because I was carrying so much garbage. And now you really don't see much of anything in the ditches. So I think if there's more in the ditch, it produces more litter, and the less we have, people don't throw as much. So. And then these are just some of the pictures of the groups that were out for the day. Some of them hammed it up a little bit and like to show us what they were rooting for, Lake Area Tech, particularly in that last bottom one. The kids at school, it's really good. We're teaching them the teachers are teaching them how to recycle in their classroom. So this will be an ongoing thing for them for the rest of their lives. Cavaliers 4-H group. First Premier Bank and Great Western Bank, Reliabank, Worthington Industries.
I think the guy in the yellow there doesn't look too excited at the beginning, but I think he's a little more excited down here. They found some old lawn chairs.
Kiwanis,
Lots of community leaders that pitched in.
and our Clean and Green Committee on the bottom, Barb Brinkman and friends on the top, and you'll see some people in a number of photos.
Like Vivian and Gary Westgard worked in both teams. My husband, you know, you got to recruit your spouse, right? So Bob's working on our group. And then he was also a member of the Watertown H2O20 Trail Committee and the Watertown Bike Club. They joined forces and usually take the Jackson Park area and around the bike trails. Okay. Just to keep an eye out for recycling opportunities this summer. We are continuing what we've been doing at Cook Complex, the stadium, Foundation Fields, and all those places where public is gathering. Anza Soccer Complex, there should be recycle and trash bins located side by side. And this shows all the recyclables that we're collecting, and they're lined up ready for pickup. At the zoo, we have the recycling and trash stations that we got in place last summer. So on the left there's 6 of those different stations placed throughout the zoo. And now on the lower right, those stations are in the park. And you can watch for us in the 4th of July parade. We have a little fun too. Don't let those white legs blind you that at the front there. Spouses of committee members. Please don't remember that picture. And we got into the act with our message to reduce, reuse, and recycle. We even won an award for most original entry. And also watch for us at the National Night Out, doing some sort of a recycling education presentation. So we'll wrap this up here, and I know you got a full night tonight, so just a reminder that littering is against the law, and I don't know how many fines have been handed out, but it's up to a $170 fine. And we can all do our part to keep Watertown beautiful. Whenever you go for a walk, bring your bag, pick up the stuff that you find. If there's litter in one place, just like Carla said, litter tends to attract litter. If it's not there, people won't tend to drop their stuff. And now we will draw the winner.
We'd like to ask the mayor to draw for this prize.
And we have the spreadsheet that is all the different zones. So this shows how we've been keeping track of everything. What was the number, Carla?
33.
Okay, zone number 33, right there, was 17th Street, Highway 212 to 14th Avenue South. And gee, it's a committee member, Barb Brinkman.
Well
Barb
deserved.
and friends. So she'll get $100 to spend in Watertown. I'm sure she'll use it wisely.
Arlene, how does the amount of the garbage picked up compare to prior years?
Okay, I've actually, the bags were down. I'll quickly look at that one slide here.
First ones.
Right there. I don't have the bags on that. But it's just a little bit down for the number of bags. So I think we are going in the right direction.
I guess I take that as a positive, that people are
Yes.
taking it upon themselves throughout the year
Right.
to make an effort.
Yeah, it's definitely a variable because we're doing different zones, and it ranges from year to year. But thank you very much for your time and your cooperation.
Well, thank you very much. We absolutely appreciate it. Okay, the next item up is the presentation of the downtown charrette. This is going to be exciting. And welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
I'm Nancy Turback-Berry, and to my left is Lynn Remmers, whom I will turn this over to in a moment. I first want to just say thank you for giving us this time. There is a large number of folks who are really excited about Watertown's downtown. I think you can probably even feel the excitement in the room tonight. We had nearly 100 folks that participated in some or all of the charrette last November. And I dare to say if we were to hold it this week or last week or next week, we probably would have even a lot more than that. You as individuals have probably been downtown in the last month or two and can tell that we have really started hitting a place where maybe we're at sort of a critical point. There's a lot of excitement. There are a lot of folks coming downtown to socialize, to patronize, and even to live that previously were strangers to the area. So there's just a tremendous amount of excitement. And the opportunity to develop our downtown is right in front of us. And it really is it's something that I think is, I hope, a welcome relief. I know you folks have to deal with lots of issues that are kind of weighty and have winners and losers, and this is kind of a win-win situation where it's just, there's no place to go but up, and there's a lot of positive energy and folks willing to work together on it. I say it's right in front of us because this is an opportunity to enhance the quality of life in Watertown, and I know that that's an issue that this council and prior councils and mayors have devoted themselves to in a very wise way, recognizing that quality of life is a huge issue now in people determining where they want to live and what they're willing to invest, where businesses will locate, where folks want to work. And the opportunity to commit ourselves wholeheartedly to a public and private partnership so that we can maximize the vitality of downtown Watertown and the vitality of our entire community is right in front of us. It's really part of a nationwide movement. If your work or your vacation plans take you to other cities in the United States, you've probably noticed that downtowns have become the key in most places, the key to gathering places. Folks are restoring they're going back really to their roots. And the pedestrian walkways, the cultural centers, the arts, entertainment, and food and beverage is always, the locale is really the magnet downtown. But we have a real special opportunity in Watertown. We all know that we're a small town, but we still have a very special opportunity. And I say that for several reasons. One is because we have a large number of historical buildings that have been preserved. We've lost some gems, but we still have a lot of wonderful historical buildings that make the downtown historically and architecturally interesting. Second, we have a relatively low level of vacancy. And I think I saw Kay Solberg come in. I know she's not alone in this, but we have some folks who, God bless them, have sort of kept the lights on. And in the years when other cities' downtowns have gotten in far greater disrepair, far more dilapidated in the buildings, and far more isolated in terms of population, there have been some real faithful people that have kept the light on in downtown, and that's one of the reasons I think, too, that we have a better opportunity than folks who are trying to climb out of very deep holes. And finally, we have already had some people and some key projects that have kind of lit the fire. Whether it is pure beneficent motives or just plain crazy, I won't comment on all, but you know that there have been some key folks who have already really taken the initiative and lit the spark. So the opportunities here, and Watertown is in a great place to seize it. And I think seizing the opportunity means that this will be the next and possibly the single greatest quality of life enhancement that Watertown can do. I went for a ride when the weather finally warmed up this weekend. I went for a ride, and if you get on your bicycle or you just choose to go out walking, and you go out around the bike trail, and there's just no way you can miss the sense of quality that offers to the experience of people who are living or visiting here. And my route, because I needed to catch up on exercise, took me up north, and I went past the rec center and thought, wow, isn't that a great enhancement to our community? And this is the sort of thing that will build on that. We don't need to be talking about spending $24 million to enhance downtown, but it is a big opportunity, and it will be a big commitment. And the beauty of enhancing downtowns is that it isn't just an investment in quality of life, but it's one, and Lynn will touch on this a little more, it's one that returns itself in private dollars and ultimately in tax dollars. What we'd like to do tonight is kind of have we're going to first have Lynn Remmers, who, if you recognize that name, Lynn isn't exactly a Watertown native, but she's the next best thing. She's a native in law, and she has really gone beyond what would be expected of anybody. She's here on behalf of MSH Architects to present the report. We'll share about maybe 20 minutes or so with you of the charrette report and the recommendations to come out of that. And then I'd like, if possible, to invite some of the other folks that are here to just make brief comments to explain to you why they care so much about downtown. And then finally, I'll make some closing comments and kind of highlight what it is that we think are the next steps and what we're hoping that the city will do to become a partner in this effort. Okay? Lynn Remmers.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. One of the things we wanted to let everybody know in the beginning of the charrette was that downtowns matter. They're the center of your city. It's what started your cities. It's where your cultural hub is. It's an important city center. It's where your employment, a lot of your employment, your city agencies are. So bringing that all together really does matter, and I know it matters for a lot of people behind me, and I know it matters to a lot of you guys. So it was a really important concept we wanted to bring right away in the beginning. Ran across this just the other day, a quote from the mayor in Grand Forks: "Communities that have strong downtowns are strong communities." And to see something like that from a city leader was just a great thing to see coming from somebody who understands, somebody who is doing the work in their communities and getting the job done. So I want to touch a little bit on an organization called Strong Towns. We had them come visit with us and talk about building our cities. And one of the things he touched on, it's a gentleman named Charles Marone, and he started Strong Towns basically from a blog, and it became this kind of national phenomenon where now he goes around to cities and talks about how we're developing our cities and how we can be doing things to basically do more smart growth. Although that's not the right term he doesn't like to use, but he talks about low risk and high return. And focusing on that low risk, high return is really all about downtowns and focusing on that city center. Low risk is incremental building, and it's how our towns were created. We started, with one intersection and a few buildings, and then when those became full, we needed to add more buildings. So it was this very small incremental growth that happened when our cities became what they are today. After he talks about World War II, after that, cities became more widespread. It became more of a build it and they will come mentality. So you got cities growing outward rather than focusing inward. So your downtowns really started to decline. So what Strong Towns is doing is really trying to turn that conversation upside down and getting back to how can we build small to keep our cities growing and really sustaining themselves. So one of the things he said here was when we look at our cities today, we see that we have been so obsessed with getting that dollar for that grand, huge project that we've just overlooked the pennies, nickels, and the dimes that are just waiting to be picked up in our core neighborhoods. So what could we do, or what do we see around Watertown that is those nickels and dimes that we can pick up and really enhance and follow through with those investments and those sustainable strategies that will help maintain our cities and help our cities become strong financially as well as a strong community bond. I want to talk a little bit about this. This is done by an public interest project where they've taken and compared two land use projects. This is done in Asheville, North Carolina, And they studied a Walmart development and a 6-story historical building located in their downtown. And I don't want to say anything negative about big box stores. We all have them. But what I want to point out is the land use comparison. And if you think of a Walmart or Menards or the shopping malls or that big box store mentality, and look at that land use and where they're located. They're located on the outskirts of town. But most of their land, their acreage, is all parking lot. So if you think in terms of a parking lot is not going to return you any investment. And so when you break it down per acre is where you really start to see that comparison. If you look at downtowns, you're going to have shared parking. You're going to have sometimes no parking if people are walking and biking more. You have multiple tenants, so you'll be multiple floors. We might not have 6 stories, but we could have 3 stories easily downtown. There are some 3-4-story buildings right now. So capitalizing on those vacancies in those upper floors is part of that nickel and dime pennies that you find. Let's see here. This is a graph by an organization called Urban 3, and they do multiple studies like this where they look at your urban density and the tax production. And what they've done, instead of, they really began to pull their data and realize that if you just show a 2D chart, it wasn't getting the full picture. So once they kind of put their information and data into this 3D model, it really starts to show the impact that your downtowns have. And across the nation, their models and their cities look very similar to this, where your downtown always has this spike in your tax production for your city. Now moving forward, we have highlighted a few categories in the results of the charrette. Listed here: parking and streets, land use, design and management, neighborhoods, downtown housing, retail and employment, and open spaces or green spaces or parks. So these were kind of the main bullet points that we've touched on in the strategy, the implementation strategy. And they'll be listed in more detail. But what I wanted to point out was that throughout those processes, the main thing to keep focused on is to continue to engage the community, your building owners and your stakeholders, because they're going to be the ones that are going to push through and make everything happen, and really get things moving. So continuing that engagement is key to the success. And also a key point is focusing on walkable urbanism. If you can walk somewhere downtown, you're going to get people to do that and to commit to that. Now we have some short-term steps. These are steps that we thought we could be taken within the first year of implementation. Many of them have been done in other communities, and I want to talk a little bit about those in a little bit, but these are some things that they don't take a lot of time or a lot of effort to implement, but they can be huge in your strategy and your implementation and the impact it has. For instance, the building or business improvement district, that was one thing across their communities that I seen was very consistent. That was one of the first things they did, was establish that that business improvement district to get building owners to buy in and to tax themselves as a way to fund the projects and the landscaping or what have you that was going to be part of the plan and the project. So something that another aspect was organizing the task force, a financing task force. This is something that isn't a short-term process, but it's going to be needed to get the ball rolling right away. A catalytic project, something that can be done to really show community that you're invested in them, that you're invested in the project, the plan, and it really helps get everybody on board. And there's been a number of communities who have taken a project like that and been very successful with it. There's a facade easement program that we've suggested, a master plan for downtown, and a building inventory. As Nancy said, there's low vacancy rates, which is, I think, a huge start and a huge plus for Watertown. We've talked about the traffic patterns a few times, going from the one-ways back to the two-ways. Repairs and improvements to existing infrastructure, and I know some of that planning has been going and started, which is great to see. Existing downtown business owners, again, involving them, gaining that support is going to be huge. And then initiate the beautification within your existing streets and your landscape, planters, benches, signage, etc. Okay, well, I want to talk a little bit about a couple local cities. The first one is Yankton. They're just, I think, in the very beginning stages of their own downtown revitalization. And one of the things that they've done was their catalytic project is the Meridian Bridge Plaza development. They also have a facade improvement grant program that they've initiated. And then also an Onward Yankton entrepreneurship goals. They claim they wanted to be the entrepreneurship capital of South Dakota. So by allowing new business owners starting out, entrepreneurs, downtown spaces that allow them to create and begin their businesses, it's their kind of niche, if you will, in their plan. And then they also have the university there that they want to capitalize on and get people to stay in Yankton. This is just an image of their master plan. And I wanted to point it out that across from that Riverside Park, right now, I don't know if you're familiar with Yankton, but there's not a lot happening there. But it looks like from this image that they're really trying to develop that side and get that, incorporate that Riverside Park into the plan. Rapid City, we've talked a little bit about Rapid City during the charrette. They recently went through the project, the Main Street Square project. They did a lot of planning and branding for the community. They had a lot of different scenarios, I guess, with their tourism. A lot of, obviously, going to Mount Rushmore, people didn't stop in Rapid, so they wanted to really capitalize on that tourism aspect. So they found what worked for them, what was their strength, and they built off that. They do have a business improvement district. They have 2 zones, and part of the funds that they acquire through that helped towards the development of the Main Street Square. And they're currently going through processes and how funding's working there and how they're going to maintain it and everything. But they do have a nonprofit organization, Destination Rapid City. They have, I believe, will take or have done a lot with help funding the Main Street Square also. One of the key components was identifying stakeholders for them, the businesses and the tourism, and having that common vision, getting everybody on board so they know where they were heading. That was a huge step for them. They felt it very important to enforce that historical preservation aspect of their downtown buildings. And currently they're completing a downtown master plan. They've developed worked with a couple of different consultants to really brand what they needed for their market study to figure out where their niche was. Some of the challenges they faced, I just wanted to point this out. That was one thing they commented, was overcoming the challenges was something that was very difficult in a way for them. They had a couple, not only physical barriers with railroads or the way their streets were designed, but also a cultural barrier where the Native American population didn't necessarily feel included in the downtown plan and in the strategy. And so trying to overcome that and make sure it was inclusive to everyone was an important step for them. A little bit on Sioux Falls. Pictures to the right are a comparison picture of what Falls Park was like while the rail yard was going through downtown. And the picture to the far right is when they relocated the rail yard and they created the Phillips to the Falls. And that was kind of Sioux Falls' catalyst project to get their downtown revitalized. So I just want to show those two pictures. It was kind of such a drastic change of what the possibilities could be when a big movement like that happens. They did a lot to infuse the arts and culture with Sculpture Walk and the Washington Pavilion. And also the River Greenway project has taken on a little bit of a life of its own recently with engaging kind of the east side of the city with the East Bank development. So getting to really utilize both sides of the river is something that's been a good thing for Sioux Falls. They're currently going through the Main Avenue Road Diet. They painted stripes and added some planters kind of temporarily to see how it would work, and they're finding it very successful, so they're actually starting construction on those medians and corners this spring. And one of the restaurants on Main Avenue, Parker's, I believe it was, had stated that once they put in those painted seating areas and outside seating areas, their summertime sales increased. I think it was by 40% or something like that. So they're finding benefit in those areas. Downtown Sioux Falls is a nonprofit organization. Well, I want to put their mission statement on here. One of the things I liked about it was that it was designing or downtowns are a place for everyone. I guess it's in their vision. Downtown, a place for anyone and everyone to work, live, shop, eat, visit, enjoy, and experience. So I really like that concept of it's not just for the business owners. It's not just for the shoppers, or it's not just for the people that live there. It really is for everybody, and residents and visitors alike. Sioux Falls has a lot of incentive programs, the facade easement program. They do a lot of TIF financing, the tax reduction program through the county. That's done a little bit differently than the TIF one, but the Business Improvement District, they do have a BID. And then also something they've been doing lately quite a bit of is offering city-owned property for development. So they'll put out an RFP and get responses back for different developments, and I think they've had quite a few successful projects come out of it. And they have the Downtown Sioux Falls actually does the retail incubator program, where they have kind of an incentive for new businesses to come downtown. I think it's a couple months free rent or something like that. So just ways to help focus on giving people a little bit of a edge, I guess, to relocate or set up shop downtown. A little bit about Brookings. This is the Downtown Brookings organization, also nonprofit, promoting downtown Brookings, a lot of marketing, development, and events is what they typically kind of handle. One of their bigger projects was the Downtown Streetscape project, and this project kind of started with one person, and they basically initiated and got a grant, and then the city also invested about $4 million to finish this project. It was a lot of infrastructure updates, and then also when the city was doing this construction works, the business owners, a lot of them took advantage of that time and said, since the street's going to be closed, I'm going to update my facade or update my signage or what have you. And this is a little bit more about the Downtown Brookings organization. They do a lot of social media. Their website's really easy to get around, easy to find events going on, where businesses are located. So it's become a really good tool for them, and as people visit Brookings. A couple events that they've had, they've basically created within the last few years, I believe. Taste of Brookings, Downtown at Sundown, Downtown Retail Incentive Grant. It's very similar to the Sioux Falls one. And then a signage grant that people have utilized if they wanted to update their signage. All right, Aberdeen, again, very similar with the Business Improvement District. Building owners actually developed it, got together and said, we're going to tax ourselves, and then we're going to fund this revitalization efforts. And the Aberdeen Downtown Association was started with volunteers to market and promote downtown. They started new events downtown to draw visitors, and also implemented a TIF project TIF financing for the streetscape project. And one of the things I thought they mentioned that I thought was really insightful was during construction, they always kept one lane of traffic open at all times, and they always maintained sidewalk for pedestrians. So whenever they had work going on, it didn't stop the activity. A little bit of advice from other communities. Community engagement, again, very important to ensure that common goal. Break down any ethnic or age barriers. And focus on quick wins. Do some small things that you can accomplish to get people engaged, to get people excited, and to get people thinking about the possibilities. And those quick wins quickly get you to the next step. And we'll keep the process going.
Thank you, Lynn. And I should have started by thanking you, the city, for funding MSH. Getting your arms around this whole issue was a challenge, but MSH worked well with us and to help solicit the input, all of which, if you want the details, are in the appendices to your written report. But thank you very much. Just two other quick comments, and then I want to bring up some other folks. It occurred to me as Lynn was talking that, we heard about reduce, reuse, and recycle, and we know that's the right thing to do when we're talking about the consumables. I think in a way that's kind of what we're talking about when America's coming back, American towns are coming back to their downtowns. It's reduce the notion that you got to keep sprawling. Reuse the things you've already got. We already have infrastructure. We already have streets. We already have buildings. And recycle, find some new uses for some of the things. And, the perfect example is, the old Pond's Bakery, and before that, Balsiger's is now, the Watertown Brewing Company, and a lot of fun for people to go down there. And the third thing I just want to mention before we bring folks up is the multiplication factor. Lynn mentioned in Brookings that when the public funds were being spent, it spurred other people to do it. All you have to do to see that that's a common human trait, apparently, is walk down the alley that got done last summer. The alley behind my building, behind the old post office building. God bless you folks in the utilities came in and cleaned up the alley. And it just spread from there. I think it would be fair to say that at almost every single linear foot down the alley, those of us with property on either side fixed up. It really is a spark, and there is an opportunity for public-private, and it really does multiply. I know we've got some other folks that are enthusiastic, and Lynn and I want to turn over the mics to them. Thanks.
I'm Greg Blow, and I sort of came to this through H2020. I was co-chairman of a committee for exploring an urban park, and we found that there were not very big pieces of ground on which to do that, and the committee sort of ground to a halt, and then I was asked to be on an implementation committee for the charrette. And frankly, I didn't know what a charrette was. But that committee really worked to bring together as many people as possible to give us as many ideas as possible. And that's what happened, and that's what this report is that you've received. It's not from our committee, it's from the people that attended the charrette. And I was really impressed and have been impressed in this process about the multi-generational interest there is in revitalizing the Uptown. And it was shown at the charrette, and it's been shown since. But I also learned that none of this happens in a vacuum. And if you want to create a park or you have another idea, it's all connected. And so it sort of turns out, I think this is a three-legged stool. We want to improve the appearance of the downtown. And I think that's one of the goals from the charrette. But that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Nobody's going to do that if they don't see some benefit. And that means we have to get people living downtown and using these buildings that are going to be revitalized. And that also means that we need people working downtown who will live downtown and who will use the stores, the new brewery and things like that. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. And how do you get it done? Clearly, what other communities have done is to incentivize the actions that you want to have happen. And that's money. It's pretty clear. And so it's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to happen together. We'll create the jobs, we'll create places for people to live, and we'll improve the appearance. It's a public-private partnership that's worked in many communities, and I think my park idea will be a great supplement to it, but we got to get started on the core of the community first, and then there'll be a lot of things that spin off. And I think the tax slide that we saw is really powerful. You can really see the return on investment is huge. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Joy Nelson from Haugen Nelson Realty. And 3-4 years ago, I had the opportunity to visit Asheville, North Carolina, and see firsthand what they had done with their downtown. That's the first time that it really generated a lot of interest with me about what could actually happen here in Watertown. Downtown Asheville was just alive and vibrant, where there had been kind of a dead community downtown. And I was so excited about that when I came back, I remember talking to the Watertown Community Foundation about that. I also was a part of the 2-day charrette and became involved in the sculpture walk downtown. I think the timing is just prime for us to move ahead, for this community to move ahead, for it's not only a quality of life issue, which therefore transfers, into economic development. Being in the business that I am, I'm in touch with a lot of people possibly moving to Watertown from within our state or from other states. And as I tour them through Watertown, these people coming from other areas, one of the things that they ask me is, let's go look at your downtown. How's your downtown? Is there a lot going on down there? And this comes from all generations, not just the younger generation. And I think in order to keep pace with other communities within our state and to move our community forward, we need to take action on this. I think this is just a very exciting thing for our community, and I'm definitely behind it. So, thank you.
Anybody else want to be heard? Don't be shy. This is not the time to be shy.
How we doing? Joe Vitek. Good to see you all. I just want to say that you have an opportunity, especially the timing is perfect. You've got your 2020 land management plan coming up. It's a golden opportunity to take a vision and plug it into a strategic plan and to actually make a difference. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Hi, I'm John Reppy. I am a building owner and also a resident of downtown. And I agree with Nancy that we are at a point where we can definitely build on what we currently have going. And I think it'll make a great quality of life improvement for downtown. Angie and I have lived down here for just about 5 years now. It'll be 5 years in October. And we've seen some ebbs and flows. We're definitely on the upswing right now, so if we could put something together at this point to keep that momentum going, I think it'll be a great thing for Watertown. And there is enough for people to do where Angie and I can park our car at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon and not drive again until Monday morning when we go to work, right? So a lot of the things that a community needs for this downtown are already in place. If we can grow them and improve on them, we'll be a money ahead of all these other communities that are our size that are trying to do this. So,
John, before you leave, I have a couple quick questions for you. Bid board, we had a bid tax, that every property owner was involved in, and it seemed like it just didn't go anyplace. The money kind of just kept growing. Facades, some would get loans on facades, but there was no real way to say, well, this is the type of facade we want to see uptown. That there has to be something that's there. Do you think the owners would be open to bringing that bid tax back?
I think if there was a vision and a
Actually,
plan
through the urban renewal is how we ran that through.
I think if there was a vision and a plan, and kind of a path to see where that was actually going and improving, I mean, if that's the only way to get it started, I don't see how a property owner could say no. Plus, there's already $150,000 left in there from before, correct?
I don't know what's in there, Shelley. You kind of know what that is.
It's a good head start.
Yeah.
Steve, I
And
think,
then, go ahead.
as you obviously know, I'm a property owner and another resident. And by the way, some of you old guys that are getting old, you should consider moving downtown. It's really
true.
fun.
Pointed at you, Bruce. I think it was
It is-
you. Yeah.
If you
It
can
is-
find a
Dan's
building with an
sleeping over
elevator.
there. So
It
we
is,
don't-
yeah, it is really fun. And if you don't need an elevator. I take the steps 8 times a day. Sometimes it's the only exercise I get. But we also have a great gym downtown. But what I was going to say, Steve, is I think if it's part of an overall plan with a lot of other things happening, when it's standing all by itself, it's sort of like if I planted one tulip and the wind just kind of goes. But if I've got a beautiful pot of flowers, there's a synergy there. So I think the idea of it coming back as part of a bigger plan, but as you heard, it can't just belong, I mean, we are an economically depressed area. We can't just expect that area to completely all by itself pick itself up for the good of the whole city.
Yeah, and I have just a couple more before we open it up to everybody else here. Two of the things that I'm curious about, the one-way streets that we currently have, and I know it showed up there that we should look at two-way. And I think the council has been very open to doing that, but we've had conflicting reports whether it should be just First Avenue or whether it should be Kemp and First Avenue. That's my first question. Do we go both or do we just go partially? The second one, and I haven't seen it yet, but it was mentioned by Lynn a couple of times about a catalyst. What would you guys consider a catalyst for Uptown Watertown?
Well, there were some major ideas that came out. I don't have the authority to say this one is better than that one. But for example, if there is going to be a new city hall, we hope it's downtown, and we hope that it may incorporate a relatively large outdoor space, a plaza that would be a gathering space. That would certainly, I mean, I'm not suggesting that the building the city hall itself is a catalyst, but thinking more creatively, and instead of seeing, what's the least we can do and how can we squeak by here, if we instead think a little bit bigger about perhaps a downtown plaza, that would be one example.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, if we do that, an uptown a new city administration office, the goal would be to have something large enough where the splash park could be there. So that's uptown.
Sure.
You'd have a lot more traffic and
That would be that's an example. As far as the one-ways, one of the most interesting things that happened at the Charette was the development of consensus over the couple of days, because I know the one-way, two-way has been kind of a tug of war. But I think, and I don't know if you'll speak up, but I know there was one person in particular at my table that came as a fairly, I think, adamant opponent of two-way streets and left saying, you know what, I get it. And let me give you the short version. When in the 70s, downtowns all across America started sort of bleeding because everybody was leaving and going out to the mall, with very good intention, the idea was sort of like, well, how can we become sort of more edge of town-like? And if you think about it, if you went down and stood at the east end of Kemp and looked down Kemp, it almost becomes laughable. And I don't take anything away from the people that meant to do what they had good intentions. But even old Albertson maybe. But I know I'm older than both of you. But the thing is, it's like, okay, let's make it a thoroughfare. So you widen it up, you make one-way traffic, you have highway lights. And it was well intended, but it's turned out to be a failed experiment. It didn't help, and it doesn't. And in fact, it works contrary. I wasn't at the comedy thing last weekend, but I was told that one of the out-of-town guys that was in doing a stand-up comedy shtick mentioned how silly it was that we had these one-way streets, and you sort of encourage people to rush from one end of town to the other. The Strong Towns guy calls them stroads. It's like, a street is supposed to be the place where you get out, you walk around, and you enjoy Thursday Night Live, or you enjoy the sculpture walk. A road is what you get in when you're going, from here to there. And we've made Kemp into a stroad. I think that we came away with almost unanimous, if not unanimous, agreement, but the people that actually went through the charrette process, that we need to get rid of both one-ways. We need to get rid of the highway vapor lighting, and we need to probably change the signage from stop and go to stop signs. The whole concept of moving people through fast is exactly contrary to what works with having downtowns be destination attractions
And
for people.
One of the other points of the destination in going back to a two-way, I was one of the people that was very against it from the onset of the conversation starting, and I'm not. I'm open to it, and I from what we learned at the charrette, it may be the best idea for downtown. Part of that is making the downtown the destination place that you want to stop at, right? You're not driving through downtown, and the streets become less important because people are looking to get out and walk around and spend time in our downtown versus coming and going to that one store and finding that parking spot in front of it and only stopping if they get that spot. Otherwise, they'll just go off and go to Walmart and get what they need. you know, it's the destination portion of it and the walkable downtown that's really going to make us stand out versus the other communities in South Dakota.
Is there anybody else that wants to say a word or two?
Good evening. My name is Liam Culhane. I was born and raised in Watertown, and I graduated from Watertown High School. I was lucky enough to spend a couple of years away from Watertown at school, and it allowed me. I didn't mean it like that. I apologize. I didn't mean it like that. I meant as an opportunity to grow in personally. And I got to see a lot of really neat things, and I got to travel to different places. I spent some time, I lived in Boulder, Colorado, and I don't know if anybody's been there, but there's a place called Pearl Street. It's a walking mall, and it's their downtown area. Yep, Bill's nodding. Denver has Market Street and 16th Street Mall. This Twin Cities has Dinkytown and a couple other places. Yankton is working on their downtown. I was in Yankton a couple of years, hadn't been there for 10 years. Brookings, Asheville, you name it. When I go to a place, I don't want to go to the Buffalo Wild Wings, and I'm not going to take it, I don't want to detract from that. I mean, there's nothing unique about that. I can go to that anywhere. I can go to Applebee's anywhere. There's nothing special or unique about that. As I think about the next 5 or 10 years, whether or not I want to stay in Watertown, these are things I consider. I consider what sort of quality of life, what activities do I have? Things that are safe, unique, and that are just a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of these people I know from my Friday nights out. There's nowhere else like the Watertown Brewing Company. There's no place else like that. There's no place else like the Opera House. There's no place like Harry's. It's really fun and special, and it's an opportunity, and it's a good reason to stay here. When I think about it, Watertown has a lot of wonderful things going for it. But a lot of my contemporaries, almost every one of them is gone. Megan's gone. I know Drew's back. I saw him the other night.
I haven't seen him.
That makes one of us. And so when I think about it, I'd love for those people to come back and stay here. And maybe they won't ever, but I'd like to hope that some of my contemporaries would come back, and it helps to revitalize the community. So, thank you.
Say, Nancy, don't we have the vehicle in place already with the urban renewal? I mean, whether you rename it Business Improvement District or, we wouldn't need to start that over. It's not that, what would be different? What would be different that?
Well, I think there's two different things that have been mentioned. A business improvement district and our urban renewal board functions to the extent, I mean, it's at least theoretically could be a business improvement district in the sense of taxing and getting that input. But the 501, the private nonprofit that's anticipated would really be quite a bit broader and I think deeper than what the scope of urban renewal district would be. Broader in the sense that we're talking about a lot more than park benches and flowers and an occasional loan, for a sign. We're really talking about something that would be a major, involve some major programs, incentives for brick and mortar programs, facades, whether that would be facade easement, working with the street and parks departments of the city to perhaps expand the attractiveness of city properties and so forth. So in some ways, it's a lot broader and frankly, I mean, deeper in the sense of more major projects. It is not just brick and mortar, though, Bill. It's also talking about programmatic stuff, a lot of programmatic things, some of which is getting done. I mean, it gets done mostly by volunteers or business people. Thursday Night Live started out as kind of a joint effort by a lot of folks, and then slowly fewer and fewer volunteers showed up, and now for the last few years, the GOS has just carried it on its back with a volunteer of, like Sarah Reese volunteers, and a few other people just volunteer. But there's programmatic things that need to be done for branding and for promotion and scheduling and, making sure that the Vintiques have their weekend and somebody else has another weekend, and we can have some new festivals and things that we haven't even had yet. So we're really talking about a lot more than what the URB. But the URB and some of the other entities, the chamber and so forth, I mean, certainly we want everybody to be a player and we want everybody to be included and work cooperatively. But we're
Well,
really talking about something considerably broader and more substantial.
Yeah,
Is
but I
it-
meant from the taxing vehicle, and that's already somewhat in place.
I think
And-
that's right.
And I would be the first to say, don't start the tax until you have a plan so that people are buying into the program. And as Liam said, Boulder, all of these places, my youngest son, they never go out to eat any place but in these little areas. And when they come here to town, it's to the Goss, it's to Pasta. They know a lot of stuff's available. That's what they want to do. But I think the two-way, I've been a proponent of that since way back. The downtown needs to be looked at as a walking, with the art that's already down there. I mean, it's a perfect thing to take an evening and just walk and look at that, take a few minutes and, read about each one of those things. And if we look at it, if we can get a consensus and that's where we want to go, then I think we got a vision. And I think you're completely right. I know that, the concept was, let's get people moving, but we need to slow them down. We need to get them, and I think one of the things the city participation would be is how do we deal with parking and some of those things? Because that's going to be, we don't want all the parking on the main street. We need to have the people get out and walk and use the sidewalks and even parts of the streets for that. Maybe biking and things like that, but, anyway, my first question was, it seems like we already have the vehicle there to do that, whether we rebrand it or maybe if it needs to be changed to completely different, to be the 5013C type of thing, if that needs to be a broader scope, or if bigger area needs to be incorporated into urban renewal. The boundaries, were set, and maybe those boundaries need to be relooked at.
Good evening, Megan Grumman from the Chamber. I just wanted to chime in from a Chamber of Commerce standpoint. We're taking calls, probably we've seen in the last year and a half, people inquiring about vacancies uptown, from both local folks excited about starting a business uptown, but we get a lot of calls from people outside of the community wanting to bring in a boutique. We just took a call about an Italian restaurant last week. So there is a want and a desire. I can't reiterate how timing on this just seems to feel so right. The folks that come, we've been uptown for 10 years. Our office has been uptown for 10 years. And the folks that are coming in, Bill, you hit the nail on the head. They're coming in and saying, where can we go and have dinner? And we're not talking about, because those are our members too. Those are important parts of our community, but they're talking about the Harry's and the Watertown Brewing Company and the Goss. They want a unique Watertown experience. So you have some exciting times in front of you, and we're thrilled as a chamber to support whatever we can do. We're launching our wine walk. That's going to happen on June 9th. We put it out on Facebook. Went crazy. Folks are so excited. They're so excited to be able to come uptown, and a good way to celebrate the kickoff of Thursday Night Live. So
I got the first 2 tickets.
you did. You're number 1 and number 2. Okay, perfect. I'm sure there's a special prize for that somewhere.
Do you get more wine with 2 tickets? Is that the deal, or?
So Nancy, if I may, what do you guys want to see as a first step? What would you like to see happen here?
Well, what a great, you've thrown me a softball. That's a nice transition into my closing comments. I don't want to cut off anybody else if there was anyone that had a burning comment to make. Maybe they'll stay around and voice themselves in their opinions. I think it's fair to say that these folks are not here to protest what we're suggesting. I will say that. I think it's important to think of this as kind of 2 tracks. There's sort of, or maybe you'd think about it like 2 gears on a bike. There's going to be this big gear that's going to move more slowly, and it's going to take a lot longer, and we may be talking about an 8 to 10 year process. And we need to get started on that, but at the same time, we need to have something going on the little back derailleur, or whatever you call that little thing on the back that that you use yes, the small gear, too. And in terms of the long term, what we want from the city, and I realize this is a work session and we don't have any proposed ordinance or a budget item, but what we're here asking for you right now is to just, as individuals, I guess, and hopefully as a group, just commit yourselves to begin to work with the private sector in an even more enthusiastic and major way than you have on a long-term, probably 8 to 10 years, project. Commit to the idea that our downtown is not, the borrowed mule that whatever, that it really is a...
Where do you come up with these things?
Well, I was going to say red-headed stepchild, but I'm sure that's not politically correct anymore. But
no,
but,
that's Shelley's saying.
Okay,
That's what she
is it?
said.
All right. That you commit to the idea that you, and you guys know better than I do what it is you're doing and what your department people are doing on at any given day, but to plan, as you plan whatever you're doing, plan for the city involvement in what we're talking about. I do think that I would really strongly urge the city, if you don't do it as a city council, then I'm hoping maybe the community foundation or somebody would bring the Strong Towns gentleman here, because it's impossible for us to convey to you the learning you get from this guy and the eureka lights that come on when he starts talking about kind of what I would say, sort of reuse and recycle your downtown. That I will tell you that we will, those of us who have already been involved, we will take the leadership on the private sector to try to set up the nonprofit board and entity. We are not doing that yet. We're talking to some folks trying to figure out what the right form is and the right mix. And it will be an entity that the sole focus will be downtown development, both brick and mortar and programmatic. And we're going to be hitting you up, I suppose, as individuals, and maybe the mayor in particular, for advice on financing task force. That was one of the recommendations. I don't know how we get from here to there, but I think those are two different things, a 501c nonprofit and a financing task force. Probably the city council, the city finance officer, and probably some of you as individuals will be asked for your ideas and your input and your time. I'm just asking, I guess, that is the long term, that you be ready for that kind of big role to start rolling. And we do need, when you're talking about a master plan for downtown, that would presumably be a city document. And, it doesn't necessarily have to be difficult. We could plagiarize about 8 out of 9 of the points from Sioux Falls master plan that happened to be the front page article yesterday. It was very good timing. It was so nice of them to put that article in right before we were coming. So that's kind of, I want you to be thinking about sort of in an institutional way how the city as an institution starts gearing up to participate long term. Then the smaller gear, the first steps, some of it I'm pretty sure you've already started. The city needs to improve its own downtown property. You're probably the biggest, we as a city are probably the biggest property owner downtown, and we need to improve our own city property. The parking lots. We need to get this two-way streets issue moving, and I think the signage issue. And I will tell you that at least people who did not participate in the charrette are likely to do some squeaking on both the signage and the two-way, but I really think we need to hold fast to the enlightenment that came to the people at the charrette. Get rid of the big, ugly vapor lights downtown. And frankly, join us that came out of the charrette. We struggled through even just the verbiage because, as Brad Johnson mentioned in his column years ago, another Band-Aid people thought was, well, if we call it uptown, maybe they'll still come. It isn't uptown. Merriam-Webster defines uptown as an area away from the city core, and uptown is a residential area distinct. It's not a synonym. So it was a good effort and well-intended, but it fails. There's a reason why every other city calls their downtown downtown. It's because that's actually the word that means what we're talking about. So we just need to start embracing the whole energy of this. I think we can, I'd like to say start tomorrow, but I have a feeling you've already started yesterday as far as the downtown parking lots. But with regard to the lighting, the two-way streets, and signage, I'd say let's start tomorrow.
Nancy, was there any discussion on the safety aspects? That's the one thing I hear probably as much as anything. I heard it again this morning on the radio. Concerns about the switching back to the two-way, about the safety concerns. Was there any discussion about that, or is that something that would have to get looked at, I'm assuming?
And I think, and in fact, though, I think actually, Mike, it probably cuts the other way. Another problem with rushing people through by hoping to line up lights and have one-way traffic is the traffic does go fast. And the safety, and if you're talking about a pedestrian area, you want traffic moving slowly. And it was interesting, if I'm a pedestrian or if I'm a pedestrian at a stop light, I virtually always look for the walk, unless absolutely nobody else is watching, but I honestly comply. But like on a bike, if a car stops for you when you're on a bike going to cross, I can almost guarantee you it has an out-of-state plate. Other places understand the idea of bikes and pedestrians. We're just kind of catching up in South Dakota. And safety really means slow down, make it safe for pedestrians, and encourage people to get off their duffs and onto their bicycles. And so the safety is an issue, Mike, but honestly, it tends to cut, I think the opposite. I didn't listen to the radio comment this morning that you're talking about, but I think it would require more angled parking, partly because, you know, every 10th person has this ginormous pickup truck that goes halfway across the street. But we'd have to have more angling. And, you know, it's also going to have to require an attitude adjustment among all of us, and I think some public service promotions on parking. We should brag about the fact that we have free public parking lots. And if the city fixes them up and they're clean and they don't look like you're going to, you know, either get mugged or trip on some broken glass, that's a selling point. How many, you know, you can, if you go to Minneapolis or even Sioux Falls and you get within a block or two of where you're going to go and you have to pay for it, you're still happy. But we have free public parking, and, you know, a lot of it is just a matter of promotion and marketing. So I do think it would require diminishing the number of spaces so that we will have more, a sharper angle and a wider pathway, but also it's just going to mean slow down.
Can I just follow up on that a little bit, Mike? I did some research when we were talking about the one-way and two-way, and there was a very fascinating article I'm not going to be able to remember the city because my memory is good, but it's short. And they did a study on crime in two-way streets versus one-way streets. And the crime actually decreased when they turned the one-way streets into two-way streets. And if you think about it, when cars have to come and go this way and that way, and people are looking and watching, it makes sense. And not only did the crime decrease, but the people who kept moving into the properties took more pride of ownership because more cars were coming by, and there was just a whole change in the quality of the neighborhood, and all they did was change the one-way streets to two-way streets. And probably I could find that article for you, but that fits with what Nancy's saying, is that not only are we making it better and safer for people to walk, but we're also creating a safer environment overall. So.
Nancy, I want to touch on something that you said a couple minutes ago. Obviously, there's a lot of enthusiasm and passion being expressed here, but something that was disappointing to me at the charrette is where is the commitment as far as the downtown stakeholders? Because I forget the percentage, but to me it was a relatively low percentage of property that was represented at the charrette. I know that was thrown out at some point, I think it was Saturday morning, and to me it was a disappointingly low number. I guess I'm wondering, you know, where you're at or where we're at since that time as far as downtown property owners getting on board with what we're talking about.
I guess, you know, I didn't look at it that way, and I hadn't heard that complaint. I looked at it, you know, maybe I'm a glass half full person. I looked at it and thought, this is great. We've got a lot of people that, you know, that don't do business or own property downtown, and they're here. I don't really remember what the percentages were. I know that there were, I mean, I can look around and I know a lot of people that were there. But I do think, I'll be honest with you, diplomacy was, Tracy got that. I didn't get to diplomacy when that was handed out in our family. I did have some frustration myself in lining people up. There were some people that I really thought should have been there who said, I can't possibly close my store. I can't possibly get help to come. And there are some people that really can't. There's, you know, they are the only staff person in their store. But I think there were a lot of folks who, frankly, didn't take this seriously enough. And I can understand why that is, because when I was sitting probably in the very chair you're in, and Joe Vitek and a couple other folks came to the URB saying, give us money for a charrette, I said, oh, for crying out loud, or to myself at least. I rolled my eyes and I thought, why do we need another study? And I think perhaps there's a level of fatigue and discouragement that some of the folks have had, that they didn't, you know, there may be some people that just didn't realize if this was really catching fire and this was the thing to be at. But we did have a lot of folks. There were, I mean, boy, I don't want to leave anybody out, but I know Scott from the gym was there, Sarah Reese was there, Mary Redland was there, my husband came all the way back from Carolina to be there. Dave Johnson and Jan Johnson were both there the entire time. There were a lot of us there.
You know, Glenn, I think a part of this is the incentives that I was talking about. Some of these people are going to need to be incentivized to have the behavior that we want. And you know what? You know, and I know some of the landowners, property owners in the downtown area that aren't going to do it no matter what. You know what can happen? If the incentives are there, somebody else will buy it. And they'll fix it up because we've made it possible, we've made it financially feasible. So I think the property owners come along, but we just have to keep in mind that none of this is going to happen without a commitment, public and private.
I'm going to just kind of wrap this up. I have one more little item I want to get on this, but just a quick comment or question for you. How much is the Strong Town person to come in? What do you think that dollar cost is?
He was very reasonable. He Skyped in for an hour with us at about $500. But I mean, it wouldn't be a terribly expensive in-service, and he is really extreme. Everybody,
Well,
I think, that saw him was just like, wow, makes so much sense. Thank you.
I would just throw that out. I think we would do that. That's no problem. So
It'll be
let's
some of the best money
get
you've
started on
ever
on
spent,
something
I
like
bet.
that. Well,
I would-
thank you
I would
guys
echo
so
that.
much. We got to move on. I have one
Thank
more
you.
little item. Perfect. Thank you. And I
Thank you
think
so much.
I can see some positive things going to happen here. Thank you. Joe, if you want to step up and give us just, nobody can leave yet. Hang on. What's, Joe's here. She's going to get up to the plate quick.
As you can see, I dressed it as a presentation.
That's okay, Joe. That's no problem.
So, my name's Joe Vitek, and this is Joy Nelson with me. The mayor asked us to speak on the fly about a program that we've started here in Watertown called Triple H. It stands for Hope, Healing, and Hoof Prints. Perhaps you know this already, or maybe you don't, but Watertown is on the radar by the state of South Dakota. Governor Dugard, back in 2014, initiated a task force to combat and study child sexual abuse in the state of South Dakota because 1 out of 4 females and 1 out of 6 males, and we know that at least 4,000 children in the state of South Dakota are being sexually abused every year. I didn't even know that that was happening in 2014 because I had retired in 2013. But simultaneously, now that I'm retired and no longer your police chief, I do a little teaching, preaching, and outreaching on the side. And so I, too, am a victim of childhood sexual abuse. And so this is very near and dear to my heart. Subsequently, my husband, Tony, and I have initiated a fund at the Watertown Community Foundation and also in partnership with Joy Ranch, where any child in a 13-county area in northeast South Dakota that has been sexually abused, whenever they go to see the police, instead of walking out the door and all the attention being given to the offender, now we have an opportunity to give them a referral card for equine experience at Joy Ranch. And so I called my good friend Joy Nelson and I said, do you think we can do something like this with Lutheran Outdoors? And well, Joy, of course, did what she always does. And she said, well, you betcha. And so that's what we're doing. And I just want you to know that Senator Sue Holt from Sioux Falls is going to be coming up here, and she's going to want to speak to you all. She told me that just a couple of weeks ago, and she's going to be wanting to talk to you about the significance that Watertown is going to play in this regional pilot program where we're going to turn this thing around in the state of South Dakota. And let me just shut up for a minute and let Joy Nelson talk.
Well, I'd just like to let you know that Joy Ranch is just honored and privileged to be able to facilitate Joe's program. Carmen Wording, who's the equine specialist at the ranch, is who actually meets with the participants. And this has been up and running just a short period of time, like a month, Joel. And already we've had
Eight sessions.
Eight sessions with participants already, and that's on a very low-key focus. So I think as this grows, I mean, it's
And let me just say this, my focus was on the kids, because having been in police work for 36 years, I know how devastating it is, and being a victim survivor myself, I know the challenges personally that one goes through. And I think that if we can take a stand on this and turn this thing around, that we can probably eliminate a lot of the social issues that we have nowadays, where we're dealing with drug addictions and alcohol and some of those things, if we would deal with these on the front side. Just today, I had the opportunity to speak with Superintendent Leslie Judding, and of course, she, being Leslie Judding, she too is going to stand up and help us in this endeavor, as all the preachers that I've spoken with, they're very much helping, and we're talking to youth groups. Since myself telling this story from the pulpit of the First United Methodist Church on September the 21st, 2014, I just happen to know that date, there's been 46 adults in this community that have come to me one-on-one at some stage of the game and said that, me too, this happened to me. The vast majority of them never reported to the police. And so it's very devastating, and it takes a toll on families and individuals. And so I'm proud that Watertown has been selected to kind of chair this initiative, and I'm excited about what we're going to do here and the good that we're going to do in this community, and a lot of lives that we're going to help. So it's exciting. Any questions?
just yesterday we had kind of a welcome to some of these people out at the ranch, and kind of an informal thing, and Joe had put the invitation list together. And I noticed that as these people entered the arena, and Carmen and I had all the horses in there for them, and Joe spoke and Carmen spoke, and they entered there with a little bit of fear and anxiety about what this was all about. And by the time it was time to go up to the ranch town for dinner, we couldn't hardly get them out of the barn. So it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Thank you, ladies, very much. I just want you to know Watertown is behind you 100%, whatever we can do to help you.
Appreciate that. Appreciate
I'm
that.
sure every one of these guys and gals are behind you.
And if there's anybody that's listening that needs, maybe they've never come forward, maybe they've never had the courage to confide in anybody, we have all kinds of support. We have support from the Beacon Center, from Lake Area Tech. Lake Area Tech has been most gracious. Diane, our vice president, she chaired the initiative we had in April. President Cartney, he is totally behind this. Like I said, everybody's on board because we all want to make a difference.
So if they want to get a hold of you, I see there's a number on the back here for the ranch. Is that where you want them to call?
No, sir, they can just call my cell phone number. It's 880-6201. That worked just fine.
Perfect.
Yes,
Thank you
sir.
very much.
You bet.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That's a big task you're taking on, and I think it's very, very, very good. So at this time, I will adjourn the meeting. We'll be back in 6 minutes for 7 o'clock city council meeting. All right, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday, May 16th, 2016 city council meeting. At this time, I will call the meeting to order, and we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, Shelley, will you do roll call for us, please?
I can. Albertson. Here. Bueller. Here. Danforth.
Here.
Manti. Here. Riefenberger.
Here.
Roby.
Here.
Solom.
Here.
Thorson.
Here.
Tupper.
Here.
Vilhauer.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. And folks, if you didn't get a chance to see our work session tonight, I would encourage you to tune in to channel 2 or 3, whichever one it's on. We had some great ones tonight. The Clean and Green did a recap, the presentation of the downtown charrette, and the HHH Fund through Chief Joe, Hope Healing and Hoofprints. I thought it was just amazing what's going on in town. So, that being said, we'll get started. Approval of the consent agenda. I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Second. Motion by Bruce, second by Beth. Any questions, any changes? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 2, approve the agenda. What I would like to do before we go through that approval, I would like to move number 9 over to number 14 so that we can get that done. It's going to take a little more time, and I think we would just like to do that. So if I can get a motion and a second on that with that
So moved.
change.
Second.
Motion by Bill, second by Randy. Any questions? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 3, application for a transfer of ownership of a retail on-off sale malt beverage license from Brink Enterprises Incorporated doing business as Casino Speedway at 108 South Lake Drive to Good Enterprises LLC, DBA Casino Speedway at the same location. At this time, I will open the public hearing. If there's anyone that wants to speak in favor of or against this, it's your opportunity. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion
Second.
by Beth, second by Glenn. Any questions on this? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 4, second reading of ordinance number 1606, amending the zoning district boundaries by zoning property south of the Big Sioux River and north of 20th Avenue South from A1 Agriculture District to I2 Heavy Industrial District. This time I will open the public hearing. If there's anyone that wants to speak in favor of or against this, it's your opportunity. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion.
So moved.
Motion by Dan. Second by Bruce. And any questions, I can have Shane explain this if you would like. Why don't you, Shane?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to put my screen up. All right. There's Glacier Lakes Energy has purchased property south of Highway 212, which is listed as 9th Avenue on this slide, and it also is bounded by 10th Street Southwest and Broadway Street dissects it. There's a lot of hatching and shading going on, but essentially the rezone is this farmland that circles and encapsulates the old Hanton Farmway. And that was zoned agriculture, and now it's going to change a use, or proposed to be changed in use to industrial I-2 for an expansion that Glacier Lakes Energy is proposing, and that is consistent with their current zoning. So I'll leave it at that.
Perfect. Any questions for Shane?
Has this all been annexed into the city yet?
This portion of the property was annexed in years before.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 5, Glacier Lakes Energy Properties Annexation and Zoning. Annexation Resolution number 1612. Shane, maybe you want to give us a little update on that.
I thought I had a better drawing, but I'll go back to the one that we were just at. Okay, so the annexation is the darker purple area. That's an awkward trapezoidal shape. That was annexed property that was previously out of the city that is now in the process of being annexed in, and then also zoned I-2 to be consistent with our previous motion and for the use of the new property by GLE.
Okay, so at this time, I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion.
So moved.
Motion by Glenn, second by Beth. Any questions on that? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Now we'll go to B. Second reading of ordinance number 1607, amending zoning district boundaries by zoning certain real described property to I-2 Heavy Industrial District. At this time, I will open the public hearing. If there's anyone who wants to speak in favor of or against this is your opportunity. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Brad, second by Don. Any questions on this? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 6, the plat of Southside Second Edition to the Municipality of Watertown, Cottington County, South Dakota, Resolution number 1617. Shane, I think I'll get a motion, a second for discussion before you'll get into that.
So moved.
Motion by Randy, second by Beth. And Shane, if you want to take on this.
Thank you, Mayor. Southside Second Edition is an area that's south of Highway 212 along Highway 81. It's north of the current John Deere dealership and south of the cement plant that's there. It's going to be a repurposing of land, and it's going to entail 2 lots. One of the proposed lots is already scheduled for development. Very consistent with what we'd expect for this area of town. So with that, this plat, we recommend approval.
And this is the theater plat?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so I believe we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any questions? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. So it sounds like we're going to be watching new movies there in October.
Could
That's what I'm
be.
hearing. Exactly. Okay, number 7, authorization for the mayor to sign the development agreement to the South Side Second Edition. At this time, I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mike, second by Glenn. Any questions on this? You want Shane to explain a little bit? You go for it, Shane.
All right, Mayor, this is a typical development agreement that the city prepares when land is platted. It identifies what improvements would be done to facilitate the change in use of the area, and also sets triggers in motion for developing roads and other facilities. So it's a pretty standard document.
So how do you track that?
It flows with the land, so portions of the property would be developed initially. Those improvements would be done right away, and then we also have a trip mechanism that if one of the other properties adjacent to the future roadways would get developed, then we would initiate a project that would improve those facilities and distribute the cost to the adjacent properties. And we can do that by the development agreement and by waiver of right to protest.
So when you want to build a road, the waiver of right to protest is there, they put it in. Am I
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Any other questions for you guys? Hearing none, I will look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 8, plat of Lot 8 of Prairie Hills Development, Second Edition to the Municipality of Watertown, Cottington County, South Dakota, Resolution number 1618. This time I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Don, second by Mike. And Shane, if you will give us an update on that.
Okay, I have on the screen the hatched area is the proposed Lot 8 to Prairie Hills Second Edition. It's another lot that's coming into development and change of ownership here shortly, so the landowner is platting it.
And a
This
bigger,
time.
if you looked at this a little further out, this is south of Stony Point, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yep. Any questions on this, you guys? Yeah, that's Dennis. Okay, hearing no more questions, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We're going to skip 9 and we're going to go over here to number 10. Repeal or carryover of capital outlay appropriations from the 2015 fiscal year. This time I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Dan, second by Beth. And Shelley, if you'll give a little update on that, or if there's any questions on that.
I can. It's something that comes before the council every year. This is something that Home Rule Charter allows the city to do. They can just do one capital carryover rather than supplementing each and every project during the year. It's a little bit easier. Basically, any project that has not started or has not been completed in that budget year, or any equipment that hasn't been purchased or was not delivered prior to the end of 2015, the department heads can request to have that carried over in order to complete those projects. So that's what you have, and you have the resolution that's being asked to be passed, and then the second document right behind that is just a version that has all the explanations of whether it's going to be purchased, whether it already has been purchased, what the plan is for those carryover dollars in 2016.
And it also shows how it affects our budget process, you know, where it's coming out of, if it does affect or not. Did it not?
That was a different document that I
Okay.
sent out,
Well,
yeah.
tried.
Shelley, just a question. Wait, do we have a motion on this?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Shelley, just a question. How long is that carried over?
The way that it's stated, it can be carried over for 3 years or until the project is
Okay.
complete.
So if it, so do we track that if it gets that third year? I mean, do we
Yes, I
still
do.
track? Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 11, authorization for the mayor to sign required documents for the community rating system application to the FEMA flood insurance program. At this time, I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Bill, second by Randy. Go ahead, Shane.
I think I'll ask Sarah, the assistant engineer, to come up and explain a little bit. This has a large part to do with our insurance rates that the community pays for our flood areas that are in the floodway, and she can probably do a much better job of explanation.
Sarah, I didn't see you hiding behind that pole. Yeah. Sneaky over there. Yeah. Well, go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you. Sarah Karen, Assistant City Engineer. Watertown has requested to participate as a rated community in the flood insurance program. We've been in the flood insurance program since 1989, and that enables people in the community to buy flood insurance. We aren't rated right now, so our citizens pay the highest rates. If you voluntarily agree to let FEMA come in and examine how you're doing things, you can get points for doing a good job and get rated accordingly. A higher rating means lower flood insurance premiums for our citizens. So we've asked to be rated, and we're hoping to slip in. We are doing a lot of things right, just the way we do it. We're not doing anything different at this point. We're just asking to be rated and hopefully get a discount on flood insurance premiums.
So the way I see it is there's no way to, it's a win situation. I mean,
If
we
they
can't do any
say,
worse than we are.
Nah, then we
Yeah.
get the same rates.
Okay.
So why haven't we did this in the past, Sarah?
We've been actually pursuing this for at least 10 years, and
Just trying to
we've had a
cl-
high turnover. It's gotten dropped, and
Okay.
our floodplain administrator is defined by ordinance. It's the city engineer. It used to be the planning and zoning official, and that position was eliminated. So then, you know, there's a time lag, and then the last city engineer left, and things got dropped, and finally, we've been stable enough to get to this point.
Was there a little bit of cleaning up on some stuff to do too? I mean, as far
Oh,
as
there
some,
was.
yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot.
Yeah, I know you guys have worked very diligently on this, so thank you.
Yeah, I like your point, Brad. Yeah, there's no downside to it. So I will, if there's no more questions, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Number 12, authorization for the mayor to sign contracts for E911 services for the following counties: Dual, Grant, Hamlin, and Clark. At this time, I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Bill, second by Brad. And Scott, you're up.
Thanks, Mayor. Our current contract for 911 services with the surrounding 5 counties that we have is due to expire at December 31st of this year. So at this point, because there is a 6-month notice of termination in the contract for both the city, Watertown, and our county partners, we're asking permission to just pursue a new contract with those county partners. So at a later point in time, I would come back to you with a contract and ask for the mayor to sign those. But at this point in time, we're just asking for permission to go out and renew that contract or pursue a contract.
Any questions for Scott? Wow, you let you off pretty darn
I
easy.
guess
I'm
so.
telling you.
I guess I do have one question. I see we're raising the percentages somewhat. Any comments or explanation there?
Sure. That is our intent, to ask for our county partners to contribute 100% of the 911 surcharge monies that they receive back from Department of Revenue. That is an increase from the 95% that we're currently receiving. What that does is it does generate, all said and done, with Kyneton County included, would be about $30,000 extra. So,
But you can kind of explain why you would go to the 100, because they have a difficult time in actually spending those dollars.
yes, the 911 funds are specifically allocated for 911. They can't be used for anything outside of a 911 public safety answering point unless there's some kind of connectivity to that center. So they're very specific on how those dollars can be spent. So for the most part, I think that our county partners are willing to do what they need to do to help keep us as a conglomeration of counties and to make that center succeed in the best way possible.
Any other questions for Scotty? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Number 13, consideration of amendment number 1 to the contract with HR Green Incorporated for engineering services for the wastewater treatment facility trickling filter rehab project, increasing the contract amount by $8,000. This time I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by John, second by Beth. And Shane, if you want to take this for us.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Last December, we entered a contract with HR Green Company to do some design work on 2 trickling filters that had needed some updating and repair. The columns in each of those facilities had been cracking and leaking so that they weren't working efficiently. And so we hired this engineering firm to help us with design and work. And they've taken us now through the bidding process. We have a contractor ready to go. And what this amendment does is it allows us to hire them to continue their work and get us through the construction management portion of the project.
Perfect. Any questions for Shane on that?
That's, Mike's are not here, but that's in their
Yes,
funds. That's not a problem, I presume.
He has enough funding in his enterprise funds to cover the work, yes.
Yep, exactly. So, okay, if there's no more questions, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 14, consideration of bids received for the Uptown Alley Reconstruction Project. I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Randy, second by Mike. And Shane, if you'll take that and give us a little idea what's going on there.
I lost track of the document on the screen, sorry, but anyway, we did take 3 bids on May 6th for construction of the T-alley in the block bound by Kemp and Broadway, Maple, and North First Avenue. So the primary bids were to get the alley itself improved, and then we decided to piggyback alternatives in that project that would improve the parking areas in that vicinity as well. So, and then ultimately we added one other parking lot next to last year's alley improvement project for some improvements as well. So as it turns out, we got really good bids. We hope to be able to do all of the work that we're proposing and ultimately end up with an alley and 4 parking lots improved. The low bid was submitted by Crestone Builders of Watertown. They were the contractor on last year's project. Their bid was $246,810.78, which was approximately 10% lower than our engineer's estimate of $273.28. So good bid. It's all 4 alternates and the base bid are all within our budget of $285,000, so we recommend that we go forward.
Can you put that up on the screen so everybody
I-
knows where we're at?
I'll do it this way.
Project. This is something that was mentioned in the charrette also, you know, where the parking lots that need work. Now, you're tied in with the utilities, everybody's gonna be working together.
Right, utilities work started this week.
And
Yeah, I'm
the
just gonna
cable
say that.
companies and-
I see the utilities are over there today digging up a little bit.
Yeah, so up on the screen, you'll see the primary area, T-alley, the alley that goes north off of Kemp, and then it tees off between Maple and Broadway. That's the primary focus, is to get those alleys repaved with new, fresh concrete like we have the last couple alleys. Then we're also gonna improve the major parking lot to the north of that. We're gonna redo the island completely. The only thing that'll essentially stay is the trees. We're gonna even move the light poles a little bit and do some enhancements there along with the utility company. That's a good thing. We're gonna repave it with asphalt paving. Then there's a small public parking lot between what is now currently occupied by the lounge on the south and the docks on the north. That is a concrete parking lot, and we're gonna replace it with concrete. We have that in our budget, and we're gonna improve that. As you can tell, there's a big soft spot in the middle that's in dire need of repair. There's a parking lot here that's over an old building that was filled in, and they've had some settlement over the years. We're gonna re-overlay that to get the drainage to work properly. And then the other alley is, or parking lot next to last year's alley is this one next. I don't remember what the businesses are on either side. I know Sassy's is here. I think this is the Five Loaves, if I remember right. So we're gonna improve that lot as well. So the city this year, when we're complete with all of these will look brand new and be able to function for many years going forward. And I think, not intentionally, but I think it's a big step towards what the charrette and all of the downtown folks are striving for. So at least we've got some new stuff that we're already going to incorporate in this year's project, so.
I think that's gonna cover the main part of the alley, or the parking lots that are in the worst shape out of all of them downtown also, so.
Though, two of those were identified as the absolutely most blighted, worst-looking areas of our uptown. And I'm so glad to see that those are on the list of ones that are going to be fixed. Thank you.
So your bids are coming in less on all these, and I think we're seeing that on all our
Right.
building projects that we're gonna do.
Yeah, so one of the things that'll come forward out of this, and what'll happen is Rob Banion and I will get together, we'll evaluate how all of our bids came in on projects, and we'll evaluate those budgets and maybe try to utilize some more of those funds towards mill and overlays in certain areas. Certainly, there's some other spots that need attention, so we'll try to utilize our funding wisely and get some more things done with it.
Shane, on this one, are you asking for the acceptance of the bid plus the alternates?
Include, yes.
And that would all of
including
that
all
will keep
alternates.
us in
Correct.
or under budget?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So do we need to change the motion so it includes all the
No,
alternates, or we're good to go?
It should include all of them.
Perfect. Any other questions? This will look really nice when it's done. If there's no other questions, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now, let's go back to number 9. I thought the whole crowd would leave. We're done now almost, you know. Number 9, Stony Point Development. What I'm going to do is allow Shane to kind of go through and explain how this will work tonight.
Okay. Short background, I think most people know the details. This project initiated by submittal of a preliminary plan in September of 2014, I believe it was, or about then. And I will apologize, in my memo, I did have a errant date in there. The last plan was submitted in March of 2016, not September of 2015. But anyway, so we've had many iterations of the plan come forward. The developer has utilized or proposed many unique design concepts, many which did not fit with our normal street criteria. You know, he's got narrower streets, no curb and gutter, some ditches, and all those are very unique concepts. And so staff before my tenure and after has worked with the developer to try to incorporate as many of those design elements as we can, and finally reached a point where we were down to talking about the environmental issues, and specifically, you know, stormwater quality and retention. And we've heard a lot of testimony both on the developer's half and some of the opposition parties as well. And I think we're to a point where we need to start making some decisions on where this project's going to head. So we came out of the, in March of 2016, the Planning Commission took action and passed 2 resolutions. One that included a channel as proposed by the developer, and a second one that suggested that there's a pathway through our process without a channel as well. And so the resultant was I came up with 3 alternative motions with regard to this project. One would be a complete, vote the project down and let it start over. One would be approve the project as proposed and let it go through the rest of its permitting process. And the third one, which would account for that action that came out of the Planning Commission, would be to alter the project somewhat to not include a channel and do some modifications to the grading, I guess. Unless there's specific questions, I'll leave it at that for now.
Shane, what I'm going to do at this time, I'm going to look at the 3 different motions that are possible. A is a thumbs up for the entire project as is. B is a, all right, have I got that turned around?
Turned around.
Yeah, A is a down. It shuts everything down. There'll be no action taken on it, then the project would be done unless they brought something back to us at a later time. B allows the plat to be approved as it is, as it's in front of us. And C is the one that you had put in there for that. I will, at the owner's request, I have a letter that he asked that C be withdrawn. So that is not an option at this particular time, so that is out of there. So C will not be included in any of this discussion for building the development without a channel. So C is off the table. So what we're dealing with here tonight, folks, is the 2 motions. Either it's an up for doing all of it, or B, A or B, up or down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just open it up to the council here, and there's lots of questions. I think all the questions will be directed to you, Shane, at this time, unless we need to bring the developer up.
Shane, of all the, nope.
I don't have a motion or second for either one. I don't think it's appropriate to have one until we have the, after the discussion.
Shane, is all the, do you feel, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion from a lot of different, I probably had 30 different emails and 15 different phone calls in the last month. Do you feel that all the criteria set forth by our ordinance in this development has been met?
That's a very slippery question, but I think through all of our working together with the developer, his engineer, and the Lake Compesca Water District's engineer, and then we hired SEH as our own independent consultant. I think that we found a lot of middle ground in that. And so I would say essentially, yes, we've answered most of the concerns and covered most of the ordinances. There is a little bit of discretion that we can take with regard to some of those stormwater issues, and that was well pointed out through that work session process. So with that, I guess I would say essentially, yes, there's always going to be opposition to this project and certain elements of it. So it depends on who you ask that question, but in my opinion, I think we're very close to a project that can be implemented without significant damage to the environment. Obviously, anything that's touched by human hands changes that environment, and we identify that very thoroughly through our process.
Shane, I know we've been down this road, but walk us through again, if we were to approve this, what are the next steps?
Okay, thank you for asking that. I actually put together a flow chart. Is that up on the screen? Okay, so we are currently in the upper left box, council action, May 16, 2016. If it was to be approved tonight to go forward, the developer and his engineer would need to go forward and get what's called a 404 permit. That involves approvals from the United States Corps of Engineers, the South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and I believe it still includes the Game Fish and Parks personnel as well. So that would be a whole process of review and permitting that those folks do. And I know that that process includes a 30-day public notice period in which that process receives comments, information, pro and con for the project as it would go forward. And then they use that information to weigh in on their ultimate decision on to grant the permit or not. So if that permit is granted, then I did have a box in here that includes a final city council review and action if you so choose. If you choose not to go that route, that permit would come, or that process would come back to me for issuing or my department for issuing a grading permit based on the approvals of the Corps of Engineers and the 404 process. Then, once all the permits are issued, construction could begin. If on box number 2 at the 404 permit, if that's declined, then it would go back up and end the project. Or if council action subsequently would decline going forward, it also would end the project. What would ultimately, I believe, happen is if that was the course that the project would go, then eventually a new preliminary plan would be submitted. We would start going through the planning commission, and you would see it back here eventually again in some other form. And that's, so going forward, that's the two paths.
Those organizations, do we have any sense what they do? I mean, do they essentially just take what we give them and take a look at it, or do they do their own independent analysis and study of the project?
Well, they have their own criteria that they look at. Obviously, wetlands and filling of wetland areas is a vital process within the Corps of Engineers. Game Fish and Parks, I would assume, would look at more of the fisheries and the wildlife impact data. The DENR would be weighing in on erosion and sediment control related issues, and quite frankly, that's what each of those departments' expertise is. And I guess as far as what they'll have their own criteria that they'll follow, and also weigh in on public input. And part of that public input is if we approve this through our process here, then they're assuming that the community wants to go through with the project.
Shane, one of the points of frustration, I think for all of us up here, has been that the experts are never in the room. Now, maybe that's the way the flow chart goes, but I've heard, and we've been told, that this is going to be disturb some wildlife wetland area. Therefore, if man's going to get in the way, it's going to create some issue. But we can never get the experts in the room Because when that doubt is created, in fact, I think I'll speak again on all of us, that when there's something we don't understand, I want to talk to the experts so I can understand the issue and vote intelligently. Why can't we get the experts in the room?
They don't see that they have by experts, you're implying that it would be the Corps and the DENR and the game fishing parks. In their eyes, there is not a project to review yet, because their process doesn't start till the full set of plans and the project is submitted to them. And quite frankly, our developer and his engineer have a final preliminary set of plans as far as that goes. I mean, they're not ready for construction yet and would be improved and be submitted to those groups if this is approved. And until that, some action comes out of here, I don't think that they will see the full set of plans and weigh in on the permits. And unfortunately, that's just part of the process, and, you know, we don't have those answers, and there isn't a good mechanism to get them engaged.
Well, it's kind of a classic catch-22, because I want the information so I can make an intelligent decision, an informed decision, and I can't get the information. That's kind of the way I see it. So, again, classic catch-22.
If you follow his flow chart, though, if it just, say we were to approve this tonight, it goes to the Game Fish and Parks and Corps. We would still, after we got that information, we'd still have that option to come back and deny it. Am I correct?
That's at your discretion.
I think if it was approved tonight and it went to the Corps of Engineers, just as my own personal opinion, by dealing with the Planning Commission for 2 years and through this process, if it went through the Corps and the Corps came back and said they've done their 30 days discussion and everything comes back and it's a go, you would be hard pressed as a city council to say no at that particular time.
No, and I agree.
Because they would have their permits from everybody.
Shane, one of the things we haven't talked very much about is the wetland situation, and I think for a lot of people here, they are really concerned about the conserving of the stuff out there in the wetlands. You know, you dig a hole through there and, you know, it can be deeper, it can be wider, whatever, but I think that's a real concern for a lot of people is what's going to happen. You know, we only have a couple of places for fish to do their spawning, and theoretically, this might take one of them out.
Well, I think it's safe to say that without a doubt, there would be impacts. But part of the process and part of the way the rules and the national and state laws are set up is that there is a way to mitigate wetlands in a process. I'm not saying that they're necessarily equal in all aspects, but if they create additional wetlands in another portion of this property successfully, you could argue that they've offset those impacts in some fashion. Now, there's another theory out there, and I'm no biologist, I can't sustain that, but that potentially part of the new channel could be part of the fisheries. That's where my knowledge and expertise falls a little bit short on fully answering that question. But certainly there are paths out there that allow us to mitigate wetlands, because unfortunately the wetlands aren't always located in areas that we as humans can't stay away from. And that happens all over the nation. It's happening in Cottington County. It's happening on this project. So for me to thoroughly answer that question, I'd say yes, there's going to be some impacts. Whether they can be offset successfully is the only question remaining.
So Shane, this mitigation does not need to be connected to the lake, correct? So it could be in the middle of this project somewhere, correct?
In theory, that would be what the Corps would consider. But I think what they're proposing, and I'm not putting ideas in the developer's mouth or answers in the developer's mouth. I believe what they're trying to do is provide us a mitigation plan within that larger lot one. And I'll go back to a different drawing. And they can verify this, but I believe that
Did you
there's some
wanna-
upland.
Bob, did you want to come up there and maybe just let them know that for sure?
So, yeah, I'll let him answer that question.
Actually, can you flip that on maybe? I don't even know how I'm supposed to put this in here, so.
Yeah, he'll turn it on there for you, and then, there you go.
Okay.
And then he'll just zoom in for you, Bob.
Okay. Maybe I need to turn that this direction. Okay. If you look at the proposed channel, the proposed channel comes through where this line is and basically widens that little waterway that's there now. And when you widen that, you actually end up with the same linear feet of reeds for the fish to spawn in and that type of thing. You give a little bit of a better advantage because you dig deeper so that even in a drought situation, a fish can lay eggs in a drought or in a wet type year. As for protection of the wetland, you come in here and you notice right here there's a barrier that was made when the Stella May channel was dug. When it was dug through here years ago, the dirt was spilled over here. Now this is all covered in trees and grass, and it makes it just a nice separation from the wetland to protect it. What we propose is this will also be mitigated, and the Corps of Engineers has a pretty intensive program on how to do that. And we'll come down into to this area of our property and actually add it on. Now, if you notice, this is a little deeper. We would like to ask the Corps as well to be able to channel that in so that we actually create an even greater fishery or improve the fishery in this whole area. Because if we can dig this through, then the fish can get back and can lay their eggs and do that type of thing. So you improve that. Plus, you've also mitigated or replaced all the wetlands. So essentially, you're minimizing any damage you do to the wetland and actually improving the fishery.
I have a question, Bob, while you're here.
Okay.
Lots 7, 8, and 9.
7, 8,
They
9.
abut the wetland area?
Are they over here?
Right in there.
Okay.
Yeah, right
Yeah.
in there.
Okay.
What sort,
Let's grab the
Maybe I'll
plat so
pull
we
this
have
up.
there you go.
There.
Perfect.
Okay. So 7, 8, and 9, I assume they're here. I guess I don't have these numbered. but I
right,
might-
those would be the lots. What
Yep.
what kind of an impact, or what, if those are developed, what kind of an impact is that gonna have on that wetland area?
Our intention is actually nothing, because we would allow these lots to have access to the lake down here, so that we can protect the wetland as far as this goes. There's a tree ridge right down in here.
So your feeling is that there would be no encroachment, no issues with that wetland area?
I can't see any. I mean, if you wanted me to address it, we could, I suppose, throw something into the association agreement or whatever. I mean, it's not I can't see that as being an issue as long as these trees and that reeds are back behind, It's kind of a natural barrier right there as well. And as long as they have access here, I can't see why we would even need to deal with that.
Well, I'm not looking at it from an access. I'm just looking at it from how they want to develop their
Yeah.
property
Yep.
back.
Yep.
Buildings, whatever the heck they'd want to do.
Yep.
Bob, on the whole slough area there, is that land that you bought? Or is that, that
This
big
is all
long
purchased-
strip?
This was purchased with our lots.
So you're the owner of that?
Of this.
Right.
How do you put that? Like Hidden Valley is the owner of this.
Okay,
We
but-
own the dirt underneath it, but the wetland above is controlled by basically the Corps because it's attached to the lake.
Okay, that's what my question was, is who controls that land
Basically, the Corps of Engineers.
Okay, so is there a way, and I'm going to piggybacking off of what Bruce is saying, but is there a way to guarantee the preservation of that area?
I guess I don't know future generations or whatever, but I'd say the way the Corps is going and water, I would say it's only going to get more difficult to do anything with that ground, or with that area.
I will add this to that discussion. We, through our process, when we were considering park donations with regard to this development, that was a discussion that we engaged as potential to take over what is, I don't know who, I can't see what drawings up there, but if I had my screen up, it was, be that Lot 1, the larger wetland area, okay? It's called
That's what's
Lot
up
1,
there.
right? And so we talked about getting control over that lot as part of the park dedication, possibly. And then the question arose that, is that even possible or reasonable if it's already considered waters of the state? And so we ultimately ended up steering away from that discussion and went for a different option. But certainly, I mean, if that would be a way or a mechanism for the city or some other governmental body to ensure jurisdiction over Lot 1 into perpetuity, I think that would be one way to eliminate part of that concern and discussion. But I just wanted to know that we did have that discussion at part of our Plan Commission process.
Well, I will tell you, the one concern that I have heard, probably the largest one, it does deal with the preservation of that area. That if we're going to take something away in the creation of the channel, that the next thing that's going to happen is the balance of that is it's going to go away. Over time, it's just going to go away. And there's
And that's why the Corps has this whole mitigation process, and, yep, exactly. Yep.
well,
Yep.
right, but
Yep.
but that's for the piece that you're cutting out.
Yep.
And the concern then becomes, all right, now we're doing this. How can we at all find a way to preserve that? Because I know a number of the people I talk to that if we said it's got to be preserved under this mechanism, those people would be fine that I have talked to.
Honestly, Mike, I think it would be, I think it'd be better if you donated it to some other group than the city, because, or even state or otherwise, because politics change, and, you know, I used to be involved in that, and so, you know.
I think the Danforth family would be nice, and we would be able to fish there. Or something. No, I'm not suggesting the city, but I would hope that one of the entities that we are working with, that, you know, if it is the Corps, if it is the GFP or something, and get an understanding that it was donated to that, whatever it is, and must remain in its form. And that, I think, for me, I think that would go a long way as well.
Or is it feasible that there could be a covenant situation with the development of the property where they would not be able to develop beyond a certain point? I'm not sure what all the stipulations would be, but whatever would be necessary to protect that part. Is that a feasibility, Bob?
Like I said, I see nothing for a plan here. Maybe like I said, a channel in here, because I think that's going to improve those fisheries and do whatever, but I
would be more in favor of Mike's concept than a covenant, because covenants are one of those, they're hard to track, and for people do things, and after the fact you need to deal with it, so I would prefer some other entity have control of that then.
And I'm going to just throw this out, because it was right away, I think the Ikes or the Lake Compesca Water Group, they've all expressed that they would take over control if it was given to them.
Bob or Shane, can we move up to the other end, up to second edition for just a minute now?
Sure.
Okay, if this project does not go through as planned, talk about what impact, I guess whether it goes through or not, talk about the impact that this has or wouldn't have on the second edition property.
Well,
You know, guys, Glenn, I don't know if that's really relevant to this discussion on Stony Point. You tell me, Lisa, if because that is not part of the discussion on this Stony Point plat.
But it does impact the third edition property, though.
But there again, and I'm not defending either side, but I don't think that that's actually his property to speak for. Is that yours?
I bought a couple lots from Scott.
Right.
But
it's not really yours.
Basically finished lots. They're,
Yeah.
so he's,
You tell us, Lisa, if you think it's relevant or not to speak on that on this plat. I'm just trying to find out.
Well, right now, everything that you guys have been talking about has to do with these plats. However, I do have knowledge from talking with Shane earlier that there would be an effect on that section of property. Am I incorrect?
No. Can you flip my screen on for a minute so I have the pointer here a little bit? I don't. Stony Point Second Edition, dedicated right-of-way up here along the south edge of it. And part of the Stony Point Third Edition is to see that those roadway improvements get done. So if the Stony Point Third Edition were unsuccessful going forward, there is some concern about how that would be ultimately used someday. Now, currently, there is an easement that gives access to the Stony Point Second Edition property. So as long as that easement is intact and maintained and all of that, there is public access up to there through that easement. But in the long term, there are some improvements tied to Stony Point Second Edition.
it's
with
actually
the
a
third.
private road, though, I think, Shane.
Stony Point Second will be a private road?
I think it was approved for a private gravel road, if I remember right.
That pre-exists me, so that could be true.
Shane, it's a little redundant maybe to talk about the water quality again, because you said you really kind of think you have a lock on that. But in the respect, remember when they had their forum, then it said that we were going to increase so much more water going directly into the lake. And then they started talking about the phosphorus level and so on. How did that get resolved then to that, because phosphorus seems to be kind of the big deal. How did that?
Well, it wasn't an apples to apples discussion. We providing water quality with new ponds. And what the point of view was that some of that water wasn't directly running off into the lake proper. It was soaking into the ground and getting into the aquifer, which essentially is the water that's in the lake. So it's getting to the lake, it just wasn't getting in there by a raindrop falling on the surface and flowing directly into the lake. The channel does change how the water flows off of land, but in the water quality aspects of the ponds that are being proposed to be built essentially capture and treat the water to a certain standard. And, there are limitations to it somewhat. It's not as perfect as the water not getting there by soaking in through the ground. But we're following the intent of our BMP manual by providing those water quality treatment facilities. Is that perfect? Probably not, but it's what we do in every other corner of the community. And what RESPEC was suggesting is that the city council and the city proper elevate their level of attention to that aspect of water quality. And quite frankly, in my opinion, it does somewhat reach beyond what the intention of our BMP manual is. And I mean, we could argue that the lake needs extra protection, and I think that can be an argument that's had, but what we're working with is our current BMP manual and how it's been implemented throughout the community, and that's what we're basing this discussion on.
Shane, I'm going to let Glenn jump back in on that question that he had originally, because the more I think about it, it probably does for water quality.
Yeah, my question primarily had to do with the effect of the runoff from the second edition, how that's going to be affected with or without the third edition project.
Right, okay, so currently, and I guess I'm not gonna, again, put words in the developer's mouth, but a portion of this Stony Point Second Edition does flow into Stony Point Third Edition. And some of that runoff water is intended to be collected and treated through the facilities that Stony Point Third Edition would construct. And in essence, would enhance some of the stormwater treatment that currently isn't happening.
And to pony up on that, if it didn't happen, what would happen up there on the second?
Well, we would have to come up with a contingency plan on how to maybe enhance that, you know, by a shallow pond or some other means until Stony Point Third Edition does eventually get developed in a plan. So there is some work and considerations that would potentially come out of this yet.
Shane, in looking at a document that I received earlier in the week from Respect, it shows that area, and I'm a little confused by this, but it shows the area that would be not on lakefront, but just off of lakefront, on the Stony Point Second Edition area, and then as it comes down into the Stony Point Third. And it shows pre-development and post-development, and it shows that whole eastern side, for the most part, of this development as flowing to the east and down into what would be, I believe, Conda's land area. But after development, it shows everything flowing southwest, everything flowing then southwest and then into the canal, into the lake. How does that happen when you've got such large elevation differences there? How does all of that water get going the opposite direction? Are you familiar with this document?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean,
How does that happen?
I've looked through it. That's a developer design question to answer.
Is there somebody from Respect that's here?
No, but I can speak to it.
Okay, Brad, if you would. You want to put this up for the public's view, or? I think. Yeah, upper right here. Okay, let me just, Brad, if I can, just for a second. The upper drawing is as things are pre-development, correct?
That's correct.
And the lower one
Can
is,
you guys blow that one up so we're more into just the pictures there? I think
this should work.
Yeah, they got it.
So as we now look at the lower drawing, that shows where the water would go based on the proposed drainage plan after development. So can you explain that?
Right, the light blue on the first one naturally goes towards the lake and towards the wetland. The area in green, as you see with the arrows, part goes on to Conda's property, the other part drains down into what we refer to as the crappie pond, and down at the bottom into the pond that's on Dennis Arnold's property. So the green all is contained within land at this point. Once the channel is built, and Rod DeYoung from Austin Engineering, when at a planning commission earlier, said they would build a berm along that line between Conda's property so that all the water would funnel down and ultimately into the channel. So if you see all of the part that naturally went to the lake before still goes there, but now you've taken all of that green part and all of that water now funnels into the channel or at the bottom directly to the wetlands. So what Respect is saying is that you're basically increasing from about 6 acres to about 20 acres. Now that's all draining to the channel.
Brad, did none of that in the green up on the top that goes through condos, did none of that go straight into the lake?
No.
I thought there was that little.
The area in blue.
I thought there was.
The
yeah, but
area
I-
in blue went into the lake.
But I thought right alongside condos building over there, there was kind of a little roadway of water going through there. I thought that was one of the issues that Scott was having.
Well, yeah, see, that
But
is funneling.
did that not-
That is funneling onto Conda's property there.
But that then goes right into the lake.
Well, through Conda's property.
But it did. I mean,
Right.
those acres in that's what I'm trying to find out. They went into the lake without being stopped. Am I correct?
Well, I'm not sure what all type of containment is down in there, but.
If you look at those trees.
Come up here, Bob.
There's kind of if you look at that circle there that he has clear over to the right, the water would flow down and then cross the road into those trees and then exit onto the north into the lake. That was kind of the general pattern that it had before. What we would do is take it down and then exit into the channel into the west, the area in the green, on the right side.
So in all reality, that whole 20 acres is not true and correct because part of that's draining into Condo's land right now.
Exactly.
Brad, while you're up there,
Yes.
I got another question for you. On the, can you slide that over just a little bit so you can see more to the right? Okay, do you see those numbers, the sediment number and the phosphorus number?
Yes.
Looking at the phosphorus number, does that number pertain only if the channel is built, or does that pertain whether the development is built in either manner or not?
That is our projection, or Respect's projection of the increased phosphorus loading that would come from the development. The blue is what they are saying the pre-development conditions are.
Okay, but independent of the channel or not, correct?
No, the channel is the conduit to the lake. Because all of that is going to be coming into there from up on top of the hill. A lot of that will be coming down. That's the increased loading.
Only if there's a channel?
If there is a channel
Okay.
there. If there's not, it's going to be closer to that blue level because it's going to be contained within the development.
Okay, that's what I wasn't sure.
Now, for clarity, and I'm not trying to be a devil's advocate, I'm just trying to be clear, that's based on percentage of land, where it flowed to and from pre-development and post-development. Now, part of that phosphorus is what's intended to be captured and treated in the water quality treatment facilities that are being proposed by the developer. So it's not 100%
So
free
that
for
number
all
hasn't
coming
been
off the land.
factored for the water
In my
management system?
in my opinion, it may not have. I don't know. It may be, but, and then a part of that, also, we just alluded to that, is if part of that land is draining, in fact, across condas and still making it to the lake, I would also argue that a percentage of that is already getting to the lake today and not, so I'm not saying that these numbers aren't correct. What I'm saying is that the perspective is that zero water off that 20 acres that we're talking about where it flew or flowed before and after, some of it's making it to the lake already. I'm not saying that it all is, but, I mean, and then in theory, our new water quality is supposed to help offset that too. So it's all in how you want to depict the numbers and describe the numbers. And so, like I said, the numbers are probably correct. I just don't know how much of that's being treated or released to the lake directly.
Part of our point is under the BMP manuals in section 2.1 says the changing of natural drainage way locations will not be improved unless such change is shown to protect against unreasonable hazard and liability.
Okay, Brett,
We
we
believe
understand
that
that.
you
What I want to
guys
do
can-
is I want
can
them
do
to
that.
ask these questions. We'll probably end up talking about it. You don't have to leave yet. But There's some other questions I think they have before we get into the manual stuff.
Concerning the phosphorus, now, obviously, we're not sure if those numbers are correct. I mean, we're just seeing one side's presentation here. But it's my understanding that last year, the efforts of the Upper Big Sioux River Watershed Project removed somewhere between 10 to 12 pounds of phosphorus from the lake. So if these numbers are at all accurate, what we're doing is we're totally offsetting what they've been accomplishing in their phosphorus removal plan.
We know that phosphorus is very expensive to remove from Lake Compesca. That's why we're experimenting with the water treatment plant. There are only a couple of ways to get phosphorus back out of a lake, and you can either dredge it out because it's in the soil, or you can get it when it's attached to algae. And in the case with the treatment plant, we're trying to grow algae so we can determine whether or not we can scale that up to a higher level. We're spending millions of dollars north of the lake we have to attempt to reduce the phosphorus loading coming in from all of the operations, the agricultural operations north. So that has been our primary focus, not only as a lake district, but as a city over the last 20-some years, is to prevent new phosphorus from coming into the lake where it's possible for us to
Right.
prevent it.
Okay, well, thanks, Brad. You guys, I know you have more questions for Shane. Let's move on with Shane here a little bit.
I just want to add a couple points of interest, really aren't questions as much as they are comments. I've taken the liberty of going through a lot of different reports as it relates to Lake Compesca and the Upper Sioux River watershed area. And because as I've tried to work through this process, I've tried to quantify some of this a little bit. You know, as the top number, the sediment number, for example, up there says that there will be 2.2 or 2,200 pounds, something like that, of sediment, which is like an 1,800 pound increase. And so in my mind, I asked Respect what did that mean in regards to volume, and it would range from about 1.5 to 2.5 cubic yards annually. So I'm able to, in my mind, I'm able to vision that cubic yard better than I actually can what a ton of it means out there. So then I went in and I was going through and having read these documents, which I'm probably very close to being an engineer at the end of having read all this stuff, closer than I want to be. There was a document, Sediment Accumulation and Distribution Lake Compesca. It's a document that I found on the internet. It was done by the United States Geological Survey, and it referenced, which I found interesting, a couple of bits of information within there. And one of them, it talks about how they estimate on an annual basis that there's 4,052 tons of sediment deposited annually into the lake. Don't know where that number came from. That was an estimate that was reported in that report. So, and of that, they estimated that 30% of the sediment came from lakeshore erosion. So we're talking about 1 ton is what this represents up here, when the average annual is 4,052. Is a ton? Yes, it is. But if I try to put it into respect with what the overall picture looks like, and then secondarily, as I read this, something that really came out to me where they talked about the flood of 1997, and they referenced that they estimate 28,800 tons of sediment came into the lake at that time, and that for the 4-year period from the end of 93 through the end of 97, that just under 62,000 tons of sediment came into the lake via the Sioux River inlet outlet area. So from my perspective, I'm trying to correlate this 1 ton to something, and it seems, yes, it is an effect on the lake, but it is insignificant when you talk about the real problem. As I read through this document, there's only one place in this whole document that references the lake itself as the problem, and that is where it references the shoreline. Otherwise, 100% of the, almost 100% of the information that's in there deals with where the problem is coming from, and that is the Big Sioux River at the inlet outlet. So then I read this diagnostic feasibility study that was done in 1994, and it talks about the quality of the water itself that comes in. And there are, they talk about, in this document, it was done by Ken Madison, a natural resource scientist. So I'm not sure. He's from the DENR, I believe. Is he here? Was here? Oh, was there? This is your report. It's very well done, I might add. But anyway, it references the sourcing of the nitrogen and the phosphorus. And, you know, like it says it can be seen that flows into the lake from the Big Sioux River are adding large loads of total phosphorus. Sources of nitrogen include animal waste. It goes on and on about that. It says since much of the land is cropped, they're talking about the upper Big Sioux River, fertilizer runoff from recently planted crops is probably the main source. It just continually goes through here and references the upper Big Sioux as the source of the nutrients, the primary source of nutrients. And as Brad mentioned, the sediment holds a fair amount of the phosphorus. It's estimated that 40 to 60% of the phosphorus is retained in the sediment, and then that phosphorus gets released under certain conditions. And so we've got all this tonnage of sediment coming into the lake that contains all this phosphorus. And so as I start looking at this, I'm going, we're barking up a wrong tree here and fighting over 1 ton of sediment. You know, I don't know what that bottom number means to me in regards to what its impact on the lake is. I can't tell you that. There's not a person up here that I've talked to has any idea what that means. And so, as was mentioned earlier, as Don mentioned, then my way of getting that information, I'll be honest with you, I can't get it from Respect. I've already asked. They can't give it to me. I haven't asked Austin, but if I do, I'll go get the same type of opposite bits of information or disagreeing bits of information. So the only place I can go to get that information is to the people that are controlling or should have control and should have sincere responsibility for this lake, and that is the Corps of Engineers, the DENR, and the GFP. I don't know what the impact is going to be. I've asked people what the impact of the channel is going to be. Nobody can tell me what that impact is. Use of the word may. Well, that may doesn't really help Mr. Drake. It may not. So, you know, and as he has stated tonight, it actually benefits. There's actually benefits. Well, I can't discern that. So there's a lot of information I would recommend, and it's probably going to be too late for many of you, but to get these reports and to read them. Yeah, it's really good to read at night. It'll keep you up. But there is a lot of good information in here. There really is. And there's been a lot of work done on this. So,
Just a comment about those, Mike, and I'm not arguing with what you've done there, but you're also using reports. One was 2002, and Ken's was back in 1994. I mean, the Upper Big Sioux, there's been millions of dollars poured into that the quality of the water coming down from the Upper Big Sioux is totally different than what it was back when those reports were put together. I mean, I can't.
On the same note, Julie used a report from 1996 to create these numbers. She stated that at the last meeting. From 1996, 20 years old. And there is a report in here that's from 2007. So this one is 2007. It's a study of water treatment for phosphorus removal from Lake Compesca. You can go on and on.
Mike, one of the other things I do is I serve as chairman of the South Dakota Board of Water and Natural Resources. We provide funding for the cleanup projects like the Upper Big Sioux project. The EPA gives each state a certain amount of money. All of those reports you talk about are the reason that we're spending money. South Dakota has a huge problem, and the amount of money that it takes to deal with it is significant. We have projects all over, and those projects go out and try to get one agricultural operation at a time, because that's the only way you start to make a difference. We're trying to clean up each agricultural operation while at the same time trying to prevent new ones from becoming a part of it. The study you referred to for the U.S. Geological Survey, the Lake Kempesca Water District funded half of that study, because at some point we're going to have to figure out how to get some of this sediment out of the lake, and where do we start? And that's what that study was done for. So the idea is, yes, we have a lot coming from the Big Sioux River. That is the big problem. We're trying to not to create more problems. And we're going to be talking about a big dam before too long. That would solve part of the big problem. But, you know, it's a huge issue. So our point is we're trying not to make it worse any way we can.
I understand, Brad, and you guys have set your bar at zero effect on the lake on this project. Is that correct?
No.
But I believe that
No,
was stated,
no,
and I
no,
believe it
no.
is. So what's an
We-
acceptable level that this project could go through?
We're setting the bar that we don't want the channel. They can still do a development on their property, and they're going to discharge water from that property into the lake. And we're not fighting that. We're fighting the channel because we think the channel is going to have a significant impact beyond what is being portrayed. And so they can develop the land as they want without a channel. That new channel is an unnatural new cut into Lake Kempesca, and we're trying to eliminate those types of things.
Brad, let me ask you a question. How, from our perspective, the 11 people that are behind here, how do we get a definitive answer, as best as we can, to definitive answer of the impact of the channel on the lake? If you were to pick one way of doing it, how would it be?
We've given you the best information through Respect that's out there. The developers has not given you any information as to that. We've tried to develop what we can, so you've got something to go on. But it becomes more of a policy issue. Do you want to create a new channel in Lake Kempesca? I think the vast majority of the people in this room would say they don't want it. And, you know, so we're asking you simply to, do you want a new channel or don't you? That's your decision. Don't punt that down the road to the Corps and to DENR. It's a local land use decision.
And why is it set aside then, from my complete lack of knowledge from the quality of water and the nutrient loads, et cetera, why is there such an adamant opposition to the channel if it's not related to the impact on the lake
It
waterways?
is related to the impact
But
on
we
the
don't
lake.
know what that is, Brad.
We don't know exactly what it is, but we know it is a negative impact. And I can't
So
tell you better than
now I go back to the
better
question
than what you
is,
have here. I can't give you better because nobody has done the analysis, and your BMP manual says in very sensitive situations, you as a council have the right to demand the developer to do a thorough analysis. That is your council's right to do that. You can exercise that right. You haven't done that.
and that's
Lake
what I'm
Kempesca,
asking you,
right.
what would be the best way for us to do it? I can't go to Respect right now. I'll be honest with you, I can't go to Respect by now
You
because
can require them to do an impact analysis of what they're doing. You haven't done that. The only information that you've got is from the Lake Kempesca Water District and their engineers, because you have not chosen to ask them to do it, because you're treating this just like any other development in Watertown. Lake Kempesca is not just any other development in Watertown. It
Shane,
is.
are you familiar with an impact study on that, Shane? I mean, what direction would we go if that was the case?
I believe there was one impact study done on Lake Pelican related to, I believe, the CAC edition at one point. So it'd be, I'd have to do some research and find out how that
I can
research
speak
came
to that.
about, but, yeah.
I was on the city council when we required them to do that, and in Steve Horning's development, the CAC edition, they were proposing to do that, and so the city, because there was a large area that was going to drain through there as well, the city required Steve Horning to fund a large study, which he was later reimbursed some of the cost for, and, but we made him do that, because we were concerned about the overall impacts on that area.
Brad, I'm going to ask you one last question, and if we were, and I'm asking the questions to learn here, because obviously we're not getting what we need as a group to make the best educated decision. So here's my question. If the developer was to go out and have an impact study done, and we agreed upon the firm doing that, and whatever the results were that came back, would you and your association agree to that? If it's bad, it's bad. If it's okay, it's okay. Would you guys agree to the outcome of that work?
Well, I can't speak for the whole board, but, I mean, we would like to see it. We would, we're going to look at it. At this point, I mean,
Mike,
we
that
certainly
was
would
kind
like you to
of,
go that direction.
Yeah, Mike, that was kind of our ask when we went to the third engineering firm, that we would agree to SCH's, whatever they came up with, and we would expect that the board would have looked at that SCH also, but it didn't work out that way.
And that
Any
was
other-
just large quantity only on that part of it.
And that's where I'm coming from on this, that if we go out and if we require him to have an impact study done, and in no way, shape, or form it's going to be agreed to, then we're wasting our time. We might as well push it up the hill to the people that actually can make a decision on it. Because if all we're going to do is have an impact study done, and it's not, no matter what it is, isn't going to be agreeable, then we're wasting time.
Any other questions from the council that you have on this thing, or comments or anything, just down that way? Bill, anybody?
I don't know if you want to call it unrelated, but one thing that's struck me is there's currently a channel out there. What impact has that had? Because nobody comments on that and says, well, this was the worst thing that ever happened to the lake, and which is what we're saying this is. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that was done back in the 1950s when we weren't around. And that's an existing channel.
It's existing now.
This is not an existing channel that you're talking about. You're talking about adding something new.
No, but at one time, that was something that was added that was new.
Right, and that was a time when you didn't have a lake district formed, you didn't have a city council that was paying as much of attention, or did we have projects where we're spending millions of dollars? It was a different time.
And I would agree to that, but can we point to anything there's been an adverse impact with that being there? We have no way of knowing, is that what you're
I
saying?
mean, certainly you could do a study and analysis and say that there's additional pollution that have come off of that, but, so, that's way in hindsight at this point. What you have is, before you is a future channel.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat my frustration I repeated earlier. The people that can answer these questions are not in the room. So we are being asked to vote, I believe, with somewhat incomplete information, because every question that we ask goes back to what those other three entities would likely do. Oh, and by the way, going forward, if it passes and the construction takes forward and the channel's dug, who's to say, or what happens going forward? Well, there are the same entities, in my impression, are the ones that would enforce that everything gets completed properly. Is that a fair statement? And they're not in the room.
Yeah, I think so. Brad, I was curious, hang on just one second. An impact study, you said one was done on Pelican. What is the cost of something like that? And
Well,
and what's kind of what is a cost of an impact study, and what is kind of a time frame that it takes to do one of those? Any ideas?
Well, the one on Pelican was a larger watershed than what they would be looking at. I think that cost about $100,000. But that was a bigger area because in that particular case, they're building a development at the bottom of the hill. So we had to understand what all the water was potentially upstream that was coming down and how they were going to size things down below in order to handle that. But that was $100,000 roughly.
Yeah, so if an impact study came back and said, it's all good, you guys would be good with that. But if the impact study came back and said there's big problems, then we'd have to go off of that. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, you're talking what ifs, but I mean,
No,
generally,
if they-
generally.
Yeah, if they came back and said, here's an impact study, we'd look at this channel and everything is good, you guys would be good, right?
Well, as long as we can be assured that there's not significant water quality impacts to the lake.
But see, that's our issue. If we try to take another step and do an impact study, and the impact study came back good, and it wasn't going to affect the lake, I still have that doubt that it would still be good enough.
Like I said, I
that's
can't
where I'm
speak
at.
for the board, but,
When that-
our goal is to minimize the risks to the lake.
When that impact study was done, Brad, did that alter the way he constructed his thing in order to meet? So if he presented a plan and he said, "Oh, you got these problems," then he went back and made changes to the plan because obviously it got approved. So
Well, yeah, I believe it did change how he handled the drainage at the bottom, because there were some areas in that addition where there were some wetlands in there and some low areas. And so once that study was done, he had a better idea of the water that was coming down, and it did change.
so obviously it got okayed based on the end result then.
Right, right.
Okay, I'm gonna start moving on. Rory, I'm gonna let you have one more question here, and then I think we're gonna move on and see where we're at. As y'all remember, Rory, I think is, go
Roy
ahead.
King, I'm from Aberdeen. I represent Bob Drake and his partner. Basically, Don, in response to your question, I think what I would say is that your ordinances aren't detailed enough from the standpoint of environmental measurements, quality, water quality, or any other environmental measurements to allow you to make a decision on those issues. Those issues are for someone else after this body meets. The law in South Dakota, I believe, is that you can only measure this project by the ordinance requirements. And those ordinance requirements have some general language, real general, about environmental impact, but nothing in detail at all. And I don't think they permit this body to get into that quagmire. Someone else has that expertise. And that's why I really think that, as Shane indicated and as, SEH indicated, we've met all the requirements of your ordinance. And under statute and under state law, we're entitled to the approval. And the issue of whether or not there's that environmental impact is for a body after this body approves the project. If this body doesn't approve it, it won't ever get addressed. But if the body does approve it, then it's for groups that have the expertise. I mean, all those bodies have the expertise to weigh these issues and to decide them. You guys they're expecting you to measure things by standards which aren't existing in your ordinance. So that's my basic point.
Okay.
Can I-
Last one.
Point well taken. I do not disagree with what you said. However, I believe there should be somebody from one of those organizations here that can answer some general questions, such as, when you remove a wetland, what are the statistics, or what's the possibility of being able to recreate it such that you are at least even to where you were, or it's impossible? Those types of general questions, we can't get answered. I wouldn't even be looking for specific statistics. It's just that, is that acceptable? Is that generally acceptable? We're not getting those answers.
John, do you have a question?
No, I actually got a question for Lisa. If this were to pass, can this be referred to a public vote?
Yes. Yes, it can.
Ken, did you have?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question for Rory. So, just so that I'm clear, are you saying then that the actions of council today on this matter are more of ministerial?
Well, that's what the case says that I cited to the council, and that is that when we've met all the requirements of the ordinance, which I think we have according to the engineers, then yes, the decision is ministerial. There isn't any discretion in the council to wade into the environmental issues. That's for a different body, in my opinion.
But they do have the ability to turn the project down as a
Yes,
whole.
They do. But if they do, and it goes beyond what the ordinances say, then a court is going to overturn it.
I would disagree to the council.
Thank you, Lisa. Ken, I'll give you just a quick minute.
It should only take a minute. Ken Madison, I formerly worked for the South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources. I wrote the report that you referred to, Mike. I believe that everything in that report is about as accurate today as it was when it was written. Basically, the lake is overloaded with sediment and nutrients, which results in algae blooms in the lake. We have sediment turnover, which makes the lake less clear. And one big concern is the algae blooms. Phosphorus is something that the toxic blue-green algae need to grow, and we've had very major blue-green algae blooms in the lake. We've had dogs that have died from drinking some of the water that's been a result of those algae blooms.
Not on Compesca, though, has there?
Yes.
Has there? Which part, Brad?
Southwest.
Huh?
By Sandy Shores.
2 dogs died over there in recent years while I was still with the department. Basically, I spent 25 years working for the department, trying to improve our lakes and our watersheds, primarily in northeast South Dakota.
Okay, we understand that, Ken. So let's go back. Let's just say you're still working for the DENR and you got this in front of you. What would your actions be? I mean, what does the DENR do?
Well, they will perhaps ultimately review this if it comes to them.
That's what I would assume. I mean,
Right.
let's just say that it went to the DENR and you were still with the DENR. What would they do?
They would review it and make some decisions along with the Corps of Engineers and the Game Fish and Parks. But
That's kind of what these guys are looking for.
I know, but the point I'm trying to make is that Lake Compesca is such a dynamic, precious
Yeah.
resource.
Okay, I'm
for
going
the
to stop
city.
you because we all know that,
Okay.
and we've been through this so many times. Okay, guys,
I think it would be a mistake to add any more sediment and nutrients to the lake.
I do want to ask you one question, though. Do you have confidence in the process that if it went to them, that they would do their jobs and make the right decision?
No.
Okay.
I don't. Like some has said here previously, it's a local decision. It's up to you folks. That lake, when you think about it, compared to any other community in South Dakota, you have a job to do here to protect that. It's a resource that you cannot replace.
Okay,
down the
Shane,
road.
I'm looking here, we have two on here that we're looking at to make motions on. And just explain one more time to the council what we'd be looking for. We have option A and B. Well,
Okay,
you gotta pick one or the other.
Here's what the real actions that you're taking are. There's 3 different plats that define how the land's gonna be broken up into pieces, lots, streets, et cetera. So, I'm gonna,
Well, let's cut to
So,
the chase.
anyway,
I just want to know, yeah, we're going to make a motion.
so
to
you're
either approve
making a motion to,
As is,
right,
or deny it.
right, and that's based,
Okay.
the actual.
So I am looking for a motion and a second to either approve or disapprove this. Am I correct in asking for that motion?
You'll take actually
A?
3 actions on either path, each approving a resolution, approving one of the plats of each piece. That's where I was trying to explain it. So there's a plat that crosses a lot owned by Munger in Second Hills, Prairie Hills Second Edition. There's a plat that crosses Outlot A of Prairie Hills Second Edition, and a plat that includes all of the streets and lots in Stony Point Third Edition.
Okay, Shane.
So
let me
you
ask
want
you-
approval of all 3 or denial of all 3?
Okay, can we lump that? Can we lump it into one resolution
That's what he's
of
got.
approval, or?
Well,
Because it's all tied together. We're either gonna vote for each one of them,
Right,
and you're
but
either gonna be no or up.
they're all tied to
right?
different pieces of property, so.
But it's
You-
all
you-
the same project.
One
Right.
single motion.
A
for
single
all.
motion for 3 numbered resolutions.
Right.
All up or all down?
Right. That's what I'm
Well,
looking
yes.
for. Okay. So, here we go. I am looking for a motion and a second for, I'm going to go with, it doesn't make any difference, approval of all 3. I'm looking for a motion and a second for approval of the plat.
Either way, go approve or deny.
Yeah, I don't care. We got to get it done.
I'll make that motion.
So I have a motion by Mike. And we have a second by Beth. Is there any other comments that we want to make before we have a vote? Okay, I think what I'll do, Shelley, is we're going to have a voice vote, a roll call. And would you repeat the motion as it is on there?
The motion before you would be to approve all 3, A, B, and C. All of those plats would be approved. That's my understanding. Okay? All right. We'll start with Bueller,
No.
Danforth,
Yes.
Manti,
No.
Riefenberger,
Yes.
Roby,
No.
Solom,
No.
Thorson,
No.
Tupper,
Yes.
Philhauer,
No.
Albertson.
No.
We have 3 for, 7 against, motion fails.
Very good. Okay, is there any old business that we need to talk about? I would like to bring up something that came across on the work session today about the two-way streets. What do you guys think about moving forward with that and at least getting the First Avenue done?
Didn't
or-
we talk about doing one, didn't we kind of
I
approve to
think
do
we
one
kinda
already?
approved- We kind of talked about doing the First Avenue. We got Rob in the
First
audience.
Avenue South we talked
Yes.
about.
And I think what we should do is maybe bring Rob. You want to come on up here quick?
I did visit with Rob a little bit. He has been in contact with the DOT. They are fine with the lights, as far as changing all the lights. And we've been kind of talking back and forth for the last year or so on that project.
Just quickly,
so.
Rob, I know it's almost 9 o'clock. I think you're okay with the switch of First Avenue over. I think you got the DOT's approval on Highway 81. We're all good there.
Yeah, they would, they'd have no problem with switching the lights,
Okay.
as far as the components that it would take to do that.
Yeah. And I'd like to get that done before we start striping that road. So if you guys are all on board, what do you say? Should we, can we put a motion out there? Is Shelley, Shane, is that what you need to change that two-way? Well, we can get a motion here. Do we need a motion on it?
Being it wasn't on the agenda?
For what?
Can we vote on it being it
First Avenue
wasn't?
South. What's that?
Can we vote on it
Do
being it
most of the
wasn't on
work
the agenda?
ourselves. So,
I don't know if it really even takes council action. I think we could just, let's just, okay. So we all good with doing it?
Well, question I got is, are we only talking about just directional? We're not talking about any light changes and the addition of four-way stops? Are we talking about, what's all included in
But
this
just First
decision?
Avenue, on Highway 81, you're gonna have two-way stops on there. You're gonna get rid of the lights there. I think the lights on probably Maple and, or not Maple, Broadway and First Avenue, probably go to stop signs, I would think, on that. You know, it's not that busy of a street. It's up to you guys.
We
Well-
are having, just so you're aware, we are having more issues with our stoplights. First Avenue South and Broadway had issues this week, and we just continue to have issues with our stoplights uptown. The equipment's outdated.
What are you
And so
shaking
we're
your
only
head
talking about First
Well,
Avenue South, which
I-
is wider than Kemp, correct?
I'd have to look.
no,
and-
they're essentially the
actually,
same.
the same
Okay.
size.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay, let me weigh in here a little bit. I think what I would rather do, rather than make a quick reaction
Not
tonight,
that quick, but go ahead.
but
been a year.
let's do one work session on it, discussing
I
how
think,
that would work.
I think we'll talk about it on Tuesday, so let's go past that then. I'm gonna
Okay,
drop it for now.
that's fine.
Any new business we need to speak about? Any liaison member reports we need to talk about?
Just a little bit about the gun range. We met again, and they talked about the good things that they saw and these two at Garrettson, and maybe not so good of things that ended up taking a whole hour. So our next meeting, we'll talk about the Brookings gun range and what we saw there. So I think everybody's just really excited about the potential of that gun range coming. There was a group there, by the way, that was very cautious about if we would put in a shotgun range. So they were, because we already have one up north here, skeet range and so on. So
Dan, has there been any discussion of trying to incorporate archery into that at all? Because I've had people ask me about that.
yeah, I really think at this point that what the discussion right now is the gun range, the rifle range, and the handgun range, with depending on whether the money and so on is available, you know. But yeah, there's been talk about it.
Yeah, I think they're kind of breaking it into two projects right now. One is the outdoor, and then one is indoor. And really, the focus right now has been outdoor.
Outdoor,
to
and
get
I
the
think
long
the
range.
short gun.
Yeah.
I mean, the handgun.
Right,
I
rather
think.
than the actual physical building right now. But that's going to come into this kind of the second phase of that whole project.
Dan, I think, didn't they actually talk about looking at allocating space for maybe a phase 3, which would be archery building potential? So, but certainly with the other two being higher priority?
I think a lot of the people are really interested in the long gun and the short gun type deal right now, and having it work for the young kids, and, you know, so, yeah. It's a phase, extra phase.
Well, just in the long-term planning, though, I've had a couple of comments that there's a lot of kids involved through 4-H and stuff, and archery is a fairly big thing, so don't just space that completely off. Keep that somewhere on the radar, if nothing more than planning that could be expanded or something. It seems like it would be appropriate to be part of the same type of facility to me, but.
I want to go back to old business if I can. Shane, Rob, I don't know which one, but I've gotten a couple of calls in an email in regards to the boulevards on the work that was done up on 19th, North 19th, about as spring has now come, about what it looks like with big rocks that were in the dirt, the same stuff we've heard in the past, where it's some of the stuff's very sparse in regards to the seeding that's there, and a lot of weeds. So the question is, what do we do about the rocks? What do we do about reseeding? And what do we do about weeds? What's the process on something like this?
I got that, Mike. We've actually been, staff and I have been working on receiving those complaints as well, and we've been working on a case-by-case basis to make sure that those get resolved. And so we've actually been hiring the landscaper that helped complete that work on that project to resolve those issues. I mean, they range from, I think there's still a couple sprinkler heads out there possibly, there's rocks, there's places where the seed hasn't taken. We're trying to address all those issues, and I don't know, we've had probably a handful right now.
Actually, quite a few, and I would just say, if you're getting calls, have them call me. I'm dealing with each one on an individual basis, and I have walked it, I've inspected it. What I've seen is most of it's normal for a construction project. It is different than it was before construction. It isn't mature lawn anymore, but it isn't, for the most part, bad. There were a couple spots that did have larger rocks, and we're addressing that. But if you're getting complaints, send them to me, and I'll take care of it.
Yeah, part of it is that seeding was done so late in the fall. It hasn't had enough warmer weather to spur it into action this spring either.
And I'm going to say this, I get the impression that the desire or the hope is that they're going to have what they had before in regards to quality without having to put any effort into that. without picking up rocks, without spraying weeds,
You
without
hit
throwing
the
some
nail
CETA.
on the head.
Yeah.
People gotta water, and when the grass is young, a couple times a day, there's a lot of work to get a mature lawn.
It's kind of too bad we didn't spend some extra dough and put sod in. Would have made a difference also. They had a green lawn. Okay. Yeah, I know. Thanks, Sarah.
I do have one old business item to ask, if you give me just a second. We mentioned this before. McLaughlin and Schultz is being purchased by Dunnick Brothers, and the attorney and I have worked out a document that transfers responsibilities from one company to the new company. And I don't know if, because we've asked the mayor, or given the mayor responsibility of signing those contracts originally, I'm assuming that the council is okay with him signing the document transferring from one company to the other. I don't know if you need motion on it or not, that's up to you guys, but I do want you to know that that's ready to take place.
Yeah, I think we'll be fine. I think so. No problem. I did want to, the heck was it? Now you lost my train of thought here, the lottery letter that came out. Scott, are you familiar with that letter at all? Or not? You got the badge, man. Come on up here. There was a letter sent out by the Lottery Commission to all lottery holders in South Dakota. It wasn't by any of us per se. It was literally sent out by the Lottery Commission. We've talked about, the smokers out there and things like that. We're going to start cracking down. And what are you hearing at your side?
There we go. Chief McPeak did forward that letter from the Lottery Commission to all staff at the Watertown Police Department, making us aware of the smoking issues pertaining to licensed lottery establishments. Basically, over the course of the last couple of years, we haven't had very many complaints of smoking in those types of facilities, and we also haven't had very many violations. We do conduct what we call bar walkthroughs or establishment walkthroughs, and during those walkthroughs, we haven't came across very many issues or violations. So at this point in time, we do inspect those facilities or those establishments based on complaint, as well as on our own initiative, which is to do the walkthroughs. So I think we're keeping a pretty good eye on it at the moment, Mayor.
Thanks, Scott.
You got it.
Anything else you guys want to bring up? Appreciate it. So we went through new business, liaison member reports, executive session. I do need to go into executive session tonight. There's probably about another hour's worth of stuff that we got to deal with. So at this time, I'll look for a motion. What? This is for contract negotiations.
Any action expected?
I do not expect any action. Thanks, guys. Huh? Pretty darn close to an hour. So at this time, I'll look for a motion and a second to go into executive session. I got Randy and Brad. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. We're going to go into executive session.